You're listening to the Common Descent Podcast.
Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
Hello, everybody out there in the whole wide world. This is the Common Descent Podcast. This is episode 196, and this is Snake Month.
It is.
It is the month of July. It is Snake Month. This is our Snake Month themed episode. This episode, we will be doing a deep dive into boas and pythons.
Yeah.
Very exciting. Parallel with our Croc Month episode about alligators and caimans. Of course, that episode was about one lineage of crocodilians.
Yes, indeed.
This, we are talking about two different groups of snakes, but also a bunch of their relatives. It's going to be a whole bunch of fun. We'll talk about what makes these snakes so interesting and distinctive, what makes them famous, some of their modern diversity, and also their fossil diversity. And along the way, we'll talk about some fossil snake celebrities in the boa and python lineage.
I'm always excited for topics like this because, I have a bunch I can say about these two kinds of snakes, if someone just asked me, but getting to learn the actual details is always exciting.
Same. This is one of those groups that I've had a general knowledge of, and this was a fun opportunity to dig in a little deeper. I know some more species details and stuff.
Yeah.
This topic, not only we are doing it because it is Snake Month, but also this episode topic comes thanks to requests from our audience, in particular this time from Jackie, Big Boss Man, and Yayoi Neko. Thank you all so much for suggesting this fantastic topic.
Good requests.
Before we get into the snaky goodness announcements, as always, we are supported on Patreon. Our patrons help us to keep the podcast running top to bottom, all the fun things that we get to do. Our supporters on Patreon get all sorts of extra goodies, including merchy stuff and bonus content and live streams with us. At the top tier, you can get a t-shirt or a one-on-one hangout with us, all sorts of cool things. One of the benefits that our patrons can get is their name shouted out here on the podcast. If you subscribe at a certain level, it sounds like this. This episode, we would like to welcome and thank new patrons Charlotte, Justin, Hannah, Peter, and Lachlan.
Thank you and welcome.
Thank you and welcome. Speaking of Patreon, if you go over to the Patreon right now, you will notice that there is a tier available that is not always there. The Snakes and Crocs tier. This is a tier that is up in only June and July during the summer for Croc and Snake Month. The support that we receive at this tier during these months contributes to charitable donations we will be making at the end of the summer that will be split between the Crocodile Research Coalition, Save the Snakes, and Turtle Survival Alliance, which are all organizations that help with reptile conservation.
Yeah.
This is an especially important time because this episode comes out towards the end of Snake Month. That tier will disappear at the end of July. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to that tier.
It goes into brumation until next year.
It's gonna be down underneath the lake, breathing through its butt until next summer. If you support us at this tier, you will be supporting us and our science educational efforts, as well as reptile conservation. And one more time, this year, the donations are being matched by a lovely listener who has agreed to match this year's charitable donations up to the first $1,000 on behalf of Mayflower Enterprises. Here's what they have to say about that. Mayflower Enterprises is a small engineering firm in northern Indiana, and we're here to help you discover your potential. Whether you're a newly founded startup, have been in business for 20 years, or just have an idea on a bar napkin, Mayflower stands ready to bring our Fortune 100 experience from automotive, aerospace, manufacturing, and construction to help your organization discover its potential through process development, personnel training, future-proofing, and more. We have a passion for the environment, scientific discovery, and deeply nerdy hobbies that include listening to the incredible team at the Common Descent Podcast. Aw, shucks.
Yeah.
We are so thrilled to partner with them this year to help support Croc and Snake Month by matching funds for the specialty Patreon tiers up to the first $1,000.
Ridiculous and awesome.
Amazing, fantastic. Dear people out there, please consider subscribing at the Snakes and Crocs tier on Patreon. Also, you get a sticker. You get a cool Snake and Croc-Month sticker.
Yep.
When you join in. Also, on the Discord, the Snake Stuff channel is open, where you can chat a whole bunch about snakes. That will be available only until the end of July, and then it will also go into brumation until summer of next year. We also are doing a Snake Month live stream, which we will have done by the time this podcast episode comes out. So if you missed it, it'll still be up on our YouTube channel, and you can go back and rewatch it. Also noteworthy about this month, I meant to say this in the last episode, and I forgot, just as Croc Month is the same month as Pride Month, July is also Disability Pride Month.
Yes.
So a happy Disability Pride Month and a shout out to all of our listeners out there who themselves are part of the disabled community, whether your disability is visible or invisible. We hope you have a lovely July.
Yes.
Speaking of our listening audience, another one of the things that you can do to support us, not so much financially, but also just a bit like morally, just like emotionally, is send us gifts if you want. We have a physical mailing address that you can find on our website. Find a link in the episode description, and every now and then people will send us goodies. We got a bunch of goodies recently.
We got a lot of cool mail. We got some postcards. One was from Ollie talking about some snake research they've been doing in the Okefenokee, which is very cool.
Very cool.
Very appropriate for Snake Month.
Yes.
We got another postcard from Charlie where they said they made a donation in our honor to a mentors program, which is a program for helping to mentor young people. And they did it because they said we're doing a good job being mentors here on the podcast.
Aw, shucks
So
again.
Thank you so much for that. We appreciate that a lot.
That's lovely.
And then finally, we got another cool card. This one's got an awesome skeleton on it from Sarah Grace with a bunch of cool gifts from the Museum of the Rockies.
Love that person.
Stickers and pins and magnets and rocks.
Couple of hats.
Yeah.
Very good stuff. What a great Snake Month bunch of treats.
Yeah, it was a good amount of mail, so thank you, everyone.
Thank you all so much. I love a year where we get more presents during Snake Month than Croc Month. That feels like how it should be.
Well, it's, we have to balance things out.
We get a whole extra day, and it's just the best. It's the best month.
You have to pile it all on to make it even remotely even.
Anyway, also, throughout the year, we're releasing episodes of Spotlight 2024. We had a new one earlier this month. There will be another one at the beginning of next month. Be sure to check those out. And finally, after Croc and Snake Month are over and in the past, we set our sights towards DragonCon.
DragonCon!
We will be returning to DragonCon at the end of August, beginning of September once again. We are slated to be on a bunch of cool science-y, nerdy panels with our friends on the science track. Once that schedule and those details get solidified and more finalized, we will let you all know where we will be. But if you are going to be in the vicinity of Atlanta, Georgia, around that time, come say hi to us at DragonCon.
Yes, we're very excited and always love to get to meet people at our panels.
With all that said, those are the announcements, and when the announcements are over, we move on to the news. Every episode, we like to gather up some news from the world of paleontology, evolution, earth science, and related topics to keep us all up to date. Will start us off with some news.
My first news is about an early tetrapod, so salamander-esque kind of creature, but this one is big and seems to be a fearsome predator, and has some noteworthy things for distribution and evolutionary patterns of these kinds of tetrapods. This is research by Claudia Marsicano et al. In Nature, and the article is by Jacqueline Kwan in Live Science.
Find that article in the blog post.
This is research describing a new genus and species of stem tetrapods, so those earliest members of land venturing creatures that evolved from those early those fish that started to get limbs. This is Gaiasia geniae and is Permian age, so about 280 million years old, found in deposits in Namibia. It was represented by several large semi-articulated skeletons, so
cool.
Decent specimens.
Yeah, articulated meaning partially in proper skeletal position.
Indeed.
Yeah.
There's a total of 4 individuals, including skull fragments and vertebral columns, so some of the backbone. And these are big. The skull was more than 2 feet long.
Oh.
Yep.
Whoa.
Yep. Estimates for the entire creature go up to 8.2 feet, so 2.5 meters. So this was a big tetrapod.
Wow.
Yeah. Potentially making it one of the biggest creatures of its kind. Like, it's up in the upper size ranges for these early tetrapods.
Yeah, and this is before the Mesozoic, when things regularly started to get truly large.
Yes.
This would have been one of the first giants on land.
Absolutely. Almost certainly an apex predator, because its jaws, as they put it, as it was described many a time, were interlocking. So picturing the teeth fitting together like your interlaced fingers.
Mm-hmm.
The shape of the face has been compared to a toilet seat. Very rounded.
Sure. Don't let it hear you say that.
Right? Big and flat face with a mouth that could open wide, potentially to be able to, like, suck prey in. Like,
Okay. Underwater.
Yeah, exactly. Like that suction feeding that a lot of aquatic predators will use. With huge fangs at the front of the mouth. So, definitely predatory. Likely one of the biggest predators in its environment, and potentially one of the biggest predators of its kind.
Yeah.
Like, this is a notable specimen. A number of things that stood out and were interesting about this new species in comparison to other tetrapods, other early tetrapods, is A, that it's as old as it is. They noted that most of the other organisms it's related to had been extinct for 40 million years.
I was wondering about, because Permian's pretty late for something like this.
So it's kind of late to the game, so to speak. This could be notable for the fact that it is a southern specimen and could denote a difference between the southern populations and what was going on in areas in Gondwana, the southern continent that eventually would go on to make Pangaea. This is also very informative because a lot of our data about tetrapod evolution and the early stem tetrapods come from equatorial sites.
Sure.
So around the equator where things were warm, where you would expect to find creatures like this. Namibia at this time would have been much more southern, closer to the most northerly tip of where Antarctica is now. So this is a very southern, paleo latitude. So in the past would have been much farther south. So it might be that we're getting a glimpse of a very different situation away from the equator.
Yeah.
This is also potentially going to maybe redefine our understanding of what the pattern of stem tetrapod evolution was. Initially, there was this idea that there was a major diversification and establishment of the group in coal swamps and wetlands in the Carboniferous around the equator, and then that there was a replacement of those early groups with the more modern amniotes and closer cousins to amphibians, Lizamphibia. This, though, challenges that replacement a little bit and might show that the pattern might not be a uniform pattern, and that there might have been different things going on once we find fossils from outside the equator.
Yeah, that different parts of the world were experiencing different sorts of changes.
Yes, and that the story the equator's telling might not be representative of the South, or that there might have been holdouts that ignored the changeover to a degree.
Yeah. This is something that we've mentioned before on the podcast, that at certain time periods are best represented by certain parts of the world.
Yes.
And then we'll get fossils from somewhere else and go, okay, that isn't a global pattern. That's what was happening over there. Here's a different situation.
This is also just exciting because this species is larger than all previously described digited stem tetrapods. So things with fingers and toes.
Yep. On land. This was just the biggest Paleozoic thing on land.
Yeah.
Up to this point.
So it's also just kind of adding majorly to the diversity of our knowledge of that group, and points to a much more global distribution and diversity than previously we had appreciated.
Yeah. I like when we find a fossil thing that's unusually big, and that's only the first exciting thing about it. Well, it's like, this thing's huge, but there's so much more than that.
Yeah, that's actually very easy to sum up. The
Yes.
longer thing we need to describe is all the other stuff about it.
Yes. Very cool stuff. Hey, I've also got a news about a new genus and species of thing that is also represented by multiple very well-preserved articulated skeletons.
Oh.
Not a Paleozoic early tetrapod, but a dinosaur. I feel like we haven't talked about dinosaurs in a while. Here's the dinosaur news.
Nah.
This is research by Haviv Avrahami et al. In The Anatomical Record, and in the blog post we will link to a press release on Eureka Alert from North Carolina State University. The new dinosaur is a genus and species named Photna herzogae. This is a dinosaur that belongs to the subfamily Thessalosaurini. This is a group of dinosaurs. These are an early branch of ornithischians, which includes most of your famous plant-eating dinosaurs. The thesalosaurs tended to be relatively small, bipedal, beaked, plant-eating dinosaurs. This group also includes Thesalosaurus and Oryctodromeus, who you may be familiar with if you know your dinosaurs. This whole group is known to have been abundant in the latest part of the Cretaceous in North America, but there isn't very much known from earlier than that, even though they have close relatives who go back earlier than that.
Yeah.
Photna, the new dinosaur here, comes from the early Cretaceous, around 100 million years old, of the Cedar Mountain Formation in Utah, here in the United States. It is known from multiple nearly complete and partially articulated skeletons. If I remember right from the paper, I think it was 3 largely complete, largely articulated skeletons, and then a more fragmentary 4th one.
Nice.
Something like it's a bunch of really good specimens.
It's always exciting.
Well, it's exciting, and it also makes it one of the best known species of small, early branching ornithischians in North America.
Oh.
Because you don't tend to get dinosaurs like this preserved quite that well.
Nice.
Big stuff tends to preserve well, little stuff tends not to. This is exciting, 1, for just the age and relationships of this animal, but 2, for its anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
For 1, this indicates that members of the group Thessalosaurini were around about 100 million years ago, older than we had found this group before, and the sister group, Orodrominae, are also known from North America at this time, so that suggests both groups had originated and spread around by the latest part of the early Cretaceous. But the authors note that the 2 subfamilies are not, so far, have never been found at the same fossil site at the same time.
Oh.
So it seems like they were partitioned in some way. They weren't sharing habitats.
Neat.
But the star feature of this dinosaur comes down to its unusual skeletal structure. The authors describe that there are bones in the pelvis, the hips, that exhibit a high degree of fusion, so multiple bones being tightly locked together, and expansion of certain processes and such, in addition to having proportionately large hind legs.
Okay.
Some of these features are similar to the close relative of this dinosaur, Oryctodromeus, which is known from Idaho and Montana. Oryctodromeus has also lots of fusion of bones and robust bones, especially in the front arms and the pectoral girdle area, and have been interpreted as potentially diggers.
Oh, yeah.
That is supported by the fact that Oryctodromeus skeletons have been found in what appear to be burrows.
Yeah.
Photna, the new dinosaur, has somewhat similar physical adaptations and is known from multiple very well-preserved skeletons in relatively tight-packed assemblages, which is similar to how Oryctodromeus has been found, but not similar to other dinosaurs in this same fossil site.
That's cool.
So that's not a feature of this environment. It seems to be something unique to these animals, and though they said that there isn't like a obvious burrow structure, it could very well be they were underground and got buried that way, which is why they didn't get scattered as much.
Yes.
If they were out on the surface. So this could be another member of this Thessalosaurini group that seems to have some sort of digging capability. Oryctodromeus has like powerful front arms, which makes sense the way that we think of like mammals and stuff digging. Photna seems to be more powerful in the hind legs, which I read and thought that's weird.
Yep.
That seems like a weird way to do it. But the authors point out in the paper that there are animals today that are burrowers, that are hind limb powered burrowers, or at least diggers to some degree, including some ground-dwelling birds who will use their feet to dig open burrows, and certain rodents like kangaroo rats and jerboas, which we talked about a whole bunch in episode 193, who are hoppers who already have these really big back legs. They're using their back legs to dig through the ground. So it could be that these thescelosaurs were doing something similar to that.
Very cool.
This is a very fun sort of because, and they say something about this in the article, that we so often think about dinosaurs having a very narrow range of options. But the more we study them, the more we see there are dinosaurs that were good at swimming, and there were dinosaurs that were probably hanging out in trees, and there were even some dinosaurs that were seemingly at least capable diggers.
Yeah. It's very well, and it's just such a different medium than what we typically think of seeing dinosaurs in. Like, burrowing mammals is kind of synonymous with mammals almost. Like,
right, they den in burrows. Yeah. We've got there are tons of rodents and other small creatures that dig into the dirt.
And like, even if you're just going evolutionarily, that's often the famous starting point for our ancestors and early mammals and Mesozoic mammals. So that's a very normal thing. Dinosaurs very rarely are portrayed underground.
Right. And our modern dinosaurs are most of them, very bad underground.
Yeah, opposite of underground.
Yes.
So it's very cool when we get to, like when we get to see semi-aquatic or more water-adapted dinosaurs to where it's just unique because it's not the norm. So it stands out of like, okay, so that's what a digging dinosaur evidently would be shaped like.
Yeah.
It's not always what you would expect because they aren't doing things the exact same way mammals would.
Yes.
Cool.
Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. My next news is also about archosaurs, and in an interesting environment situation. These are pseudosuchians.
How dare you?
I didn't say nothing. It's pseudosuchians.
Dare you come on to
It's not even real
the
suchians.
snake episode with your counterfeit crocodilians.
Just kinda suchians. Sorta suchians.
That's right. My next bit of news is about snakes.
There we go. All right. Balance it back out. This is research by Nathan Smith in Biology Letters, and the article is a press release from the Natural History Museum of Los Angeles in Science Daily. This is a new genus and species of pseudosuchian, one which I'm not going to even try to read. I'm going to let you read it.
Pick me. Oh, okay. Yep. That is Banguiguishingasuchus.
Yep.
Banguiguishingus. Just point at me whenever you want me to say it.
Yeah, right?
Banguiguishingasuchus is a pseudosuchian.
And that is the new genus. This is also new species, which is Aremicurminus. These are, as our kibitzing at the beginning suggested, on the croc line, but not crocs. They're before true crocs and even really the lineages that would start looking like crocs showed up. These are terrestrial predators, typically. This is not a particularly big member. Some pseudosuchians got very large. This one was like 5 to 6 feet long, so moderate size. It's from the Triassic, which is where you find most of your pseudosuchians. This one's from Nevada, and is exciting due to the fact that the material, the sediment it came from, suggests that it was in the Panthalazine Ocean, which was the global ocean that surrounded Pangaea, that it was buried in the coastal waters of that ocean, which is supported in the sediment by the abundant ammonites and large body ichthyosaurs found around this specimen.
Ocean stuff.
Yep. We don't know a lot about how this one would have been living. The skull's partial, so we don't know for sure how it would have been hunting or going around. But it likely wasn't swimming out in the water. They do have some well-preserved limbs that are well-developed for moving on land and no evidence of aquatic adaptations like, webbing or flattening or, that extra muscle attachment that we'd expect for moving through the water. So probably if it was in the water at all, it stuck close to the shore and most likely was a shoreline predator.
Yeah.
Moving around and hunting on the beach or scavenging or whatnot. This is interesting for the fact that there are other pseudosuchians known from shoreline or close to shoreline material. These from the Tethys Ocean, the one running through the interior of Pangaea, which include at least 2 other genera of pseudosuchian. This is the first one found along the Panthalassa Ocean, so new type of coast, but also is notable because none of these coastal pseudotsuchians are closely related.
Okay, so this is a thing that happened multiple times in multiple groups.
It seems like a convergent type of lifestyle that pseudotsuchians did multiple times in multiple coastlines, which is interesting. One, just because learning about the common evolutionary patterns of this group is interesting. There was one quote in the article also that noted that they were surprised when they found it because it was so clearly a terrestrial animal found in very much marine sediment.
Yeah, that might have like drifted out or washed out to sea from where it was actually hanging out, which was out on the shore.
Exactly. So like they weren't expecting to find a pseudotsuchian in these materials, so it just is notable that it's not the only one that was probably living this way. But it's also interesting since it doesn't seem like any of this coastal shoreline behavior or groups led to any semi-aquatic lineages after that.
Yeah, that this isn't a close cousin of the marine crocs or any of those groups that actually went full out into the water.
Yeah, a lot of the pseudotsuchians of this time did not go aquatic, really. They were a mainly terrestrial group. So it's just notable that we did have some with close association with marine habitats.
Yeah, that were shoreline predators or something like that.
Which is often what we would expect to maybe give rise to some swimming members. Doesn't seem that any of these did. So just not necessarily anything super wrong with that, but just a kind of odd note.
Yeah, well, it's a useful reminder that there isn't a necessary end point. There are plenty of animals today that hang out near the water, but don't have any relatives that are aquatic animals.
Yes.
Even though that is the trajectory that fully marine tetrapods often do follow.
This specimen also adds to the diversity of the Papasauridae, which is the group it fell out in when they did a phylogenetic study. And the name was chosen to try to pay respect to the local people who originally inhabited the Augusta Mountains, the Phalanpyutes Shoshone tribe. And so the first part of the genus means fish catching, and then sucus, which is your Sobek connection to crocodile. So yeah, just an interesting member of the Pseudotsuchians in an interesting habitat.
Yeah, very cool. I didn't mention it, but the dinosaur that I just talked about, Futna, also is named from, I don't remember what the language is, but I think it was a language from the region of Guam and nearby.
Oh, yeah.
Which, if I remember the article correctly, the main author has a relation to that. That their heritage is tied into that part of the world. So it's a very fun trend we're seeing more and more in paleontology, pulling from a variety of different cultures and languages to inspire the names of ancient creatures.
Yeah, well, and trying to pay respect to the actual location it came from, not just necessarily the people who found it.
Yes, and cultures that are not often honored or acknowledged in these discussions.
Yeah.
Well, allow me to get us back on track. One last bit of news. This one's about snakes. It is not about fossil snakes. This is about modern snake behavior, specifically the way that different snakes use their jaws and teeth during striking at prey.
Ooh.
This is research. This actually isn't new. This is from earlier this year, but it was very cool, and we didn't talk about it back then, and it's snake moan. This is research that was presented on at this year's meeting of the Society for Integrative and Comparative Biology, SICB, as its friends call it. So this was this isn't a peer-reviewed, published study, but it's research that was presented at the conference. This research was presented there by Bill Ryerson, and there was an article about it that we will link to in Live Science by Sasha Pear. There has been lots of research on the functional morphology of snake fangs. Venomous snakes who have fangs that are specialized in shape and function for delivering venom. But snakes have lots of other teeth, and the other teeth in the mouths tend not to have received quite as much research. The other typical snake teeth are often relatively short, relatively narrow. They tend to be curved backwards, the way that a lot of predator teeth, fish are like this a lot, where the teeth are curved inward towards the throat so that it's hard to pull out once you get bit.
Yes.
In this study, the researcher wanted to investigate how snake teeth vary across snakes and how those teeth are used during prey capture.
Yeah.
Which is to say, when they strike out at prey, is there variation in how those teeth are applied? This was done by taking x-rays of the jaws of almost 70 snakes, representing 13 different species, and high-speed videos of these snakes striking at mice. It sounds like these were dead mice that were wiggled in front of them so that they would strike at it, and then high-speed footage so you could watch in slow motion what they were doing.
One of the most satisfying kinds of slow-mo footage.
Yes.
Is snake striking stuff.
Now, the study found that there is indeed variation within the teeth of snakes and within their striking habits, which isn't surprising.
Yeah.
You know, they were looking at things as disparate as, like, king snakes and pythons. But what is kind of surprising is that the species that they looked at fell relatively neatly into two main categories of functional morphology. The author has labeled these two categories strikers and lungers.
Oh.
Strikers are the species that strike very quickly with their mouths wide open. Lungers tend to strike more slowly, have a smaller gape, the mouth isn't quite as wide open, and what they described as larger approach distance, which I assume is the distance from where you're striking to the creature. And the teeth between these two habits also were different in consistent ways. In the striker category, the faster striking ones, the teeth toward the front of the jaws are more narrow and more upright. They're straighter.
Yeah.
They're more perpendicular to the jaw. And then as you move farther back along the jaw, the teeth become broader and more curved.
Nice.
When these, quote, strikers struck at their prey, the way they did it is the straight teeth of the lower jaw would hit the prey first, and then the rest of the mouth would wrap around the prey. So they're striking, lower jaw, front teeth hits first, and then that acts, they described it as the fulcrum, that the rest of the skull then, digs in those upper teeth.
And those front teeth not being as curved mean they're pointing straight with the strike.
Yes, exactly. This, they noted, was seen in many boas and pythons of the species that they tested. The lungers, the ones that struck a little more slowly with less wide open mouth, the teeth are more uniform, so they're pretty consistently curved, and they strike with both jaws at the same time.
Yeah, gotcha. So it's more of just a bite instead of catching your mouth on the thing.
Yes, exactly. And the second type was seen more, they reported, in king snakes and pine snakes and certain ground boas. So two different striking behaviors. One that seems to be a little bit more, precise might not be quite the word, but you're grabbing it with your whole mouth. Whereas the faster version is throwing your face towards the thing and catching your jaw on it.
Yeah, you're using your face like a grapple hook.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. And the tooth morphology tracks with that variation.
I always love when this happens, because this happens in the news quite often. As soon as you were describing them, I could picture those different kinds of strikes, because I've seen snakes, like slow-mo of a snake hitting it, and their momentum still carrying their face into the prey.
Yes.
Versus watching like a rat snake be fed, just, someone's pet or something, and it's just much more of a grab.
Yep.
And I just never thought much about those being distinct differences. But it makes sense. Those are very fundamentally different ways to quickly bite at a thing.
Yeah, it's surprising that it's so distinct and consistent in two styles.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting thing to find. In the abstract, they mentioned that, or maybe it was the article, in the future, they want to expand and look at like arboreal species and digging species, because they only looked at 13 species of snakes.
Yeah.
That's not a whole lot of diversity. So are there yet more striking styles? I'd be curious to know if it varies among different types of venomous snakes.
Absolutely.
And then this wasn't mentioned in the article or in the actual abstract in the abstract book, but it was my first thought, which is if there's a skeletal feature that can tell you about the striking behavior of a snake, can we see that in fossils?
Yep.
If you have a whole jaw, can you tell from the shape of the teeth what type of strike that fossil snake was making?
Yes. Yeah. It's also got a very nice, just mechanical comparison of speed versus precision, and that if you're going to increase the speed, you have to compensate by now just building in. It's like a tow hook on a plane. Like,
yes,
if you're gonna land at high speeds, you now need to compensate for the lack of precision. If you're gonna strike extremely fast, you need mechanisms that are going to help you bite.
Yes. I'd also be curious to see if it tracks with prey type. Like, I wouldn't be at all surprised to learn, and this is a speculation, but if you have a snake that predominantly feeds on birds, does it do those tend to be fast strikers?
Yes.
Because you're striking at something that is very fast and can easily get away.
Well, and I also wouldn't be surprised if you see, like, that kind of fast striking only works on certain kinds of prey if you can catch easily on it. If it's one that needs a more finesse to the way you grab it.
Yes. Well, king snakes were mentioned there, and king snakes famously eat other snakes.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Is that one of the reasons why you're striking the way you are, that there's something about eating other snakes that makes it more beneficial to strike in a particular way?
That either you need to catch it in a very precise, spot, or that if you were to do that fast strike, you might slide off of it. Like, because I could see a scaled animal, like, not catching or something. Like, if you have something that's armored.
Yeah, well, and boas and pythons often are going after birds and mammals.
Yes, which would be nice and squishy and fluffy for catching on. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if prey type varies a lot with these methods.
Yeah, I'd love to see what this looks like for a fish-eating snake.
Yeah.
Like, what are your teeth like in a fish-eating snake?
Yeah, or the snail-eating snakes and stuff.
Well, and then some of them are super weird.
Yeah.
Like, the snail-eating ones are going to be weird. Egg-eating snakes tend to not have teeth.
Yep.
Because what do you need? Although there was a study that came out recently that showed that egg-eating snakes have a extra wide gape.
Yes.
Even for snakes, their mouths are able to stretch extra wide. So there is variation in how the jaws and teeth work.
Yeah. Oh, so cool.
So cool. Best animals. That is an excellent segue into our main topic. After a short musical interlude, we will do a whole deep dive into some of the world's most fascinating and famous groups of snakes, boas, and pythons. Stay tuned. Boas and pythons are some of the most famous and well-recognized snakes in the world.
Yes.
They are famous because they are impressive predators. They're famous. They're snakes. Snakes tend to get a lot of attention. They're very diverse and widespread. They're found around the world. They're also extremely aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, they are.
Like, a lot of boas and pythons are very colorful and have very distinctive patterns. They also have very charismatic faces. Like, a lot of them have very distinctive head shapes and, like, big colorful eyes. They're just really nice looking snakes.
Absolutely.
There are also a lot of boas and python species are relatively chill snakes, so they also make really good, like, demonstration snakes, or a lot of them are in the pet trade. Boas and pythons are easy snakes to like and to be endeared to, I think.
Yeah, no, they are a good group. Like, they're impressive when you get to see them. They're memorable. And they leave an impression.
Yeah, and also on top of all that, they get big.
Yep,
they are animals that get to big sizes tend to become famous ones. Boas and pythons include the biggest snakes in the world as well. Now, last month on your Crocs episode 194, that episode was alligators and caimans.
Yes.
And alligators and caimans are in the same family. That is one group of crocodilians. Boas and pythons are not. Boas and pythons are two different groups. The families Boidae and Pythonidae, and outside of those, the lineages Booidea and Pythonoidea. They are two similar groups of snakes, but they are two distinct lineages with various other groups of snakes more or less closely related to one or the other. This hasn't always been recognized. For a while in the past, pythons were considered boids.
Yes.
They were classified within boids. I've even still seen some relatively recent papers that have considered pythons booids.
Oh, okay.
Just outside. But these days, generally, the booid superfamily and the pythonoid superfamily are separated from each other. Two different groups of snakes. Generally speaking, boas, at least sort of the core group boas, we'll get into boa diversity in a bit. There are around 60 species of boas in the world today. These include your boa constrictors, which incidentally is the binomial name of that animal.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Boa constrictor is the genus species of red-tailed boas.
Oh.
It's one of the short list of animals whose popular name somehow is their binomial scientific name.
Well done.
Yeah, that's boa constrictor is a species.
Well, it's a very descriptive name. Like, it
That's what it does.
Tells you what kind of snake it is and what it does.
Right up front.
So, like, it's very helpful.
So you've got those. You've got your rainbow boas, your tree boas, as well as anacondas.
Yeah.
These are in boas. Boas live in the tropics, predominantly in Central and South America. This is a New World American group. Pythons include about 40 species, so similar in diversity. Pythons include your tree pythons, your water pythons, your ball pythons, Burmese pythons. Pythons are nice because they're all basically called pythons.
Yep.
These are also a tropical group, but they are Old World. You find them in India and Southern Asia, Southeast Asia into Indonesia and the Philippines, Central and Southern Africa, and they are especially diverse in Australia and New Guinea.
Oh, yeah.
That region. Something like 2/3 of modern python species are Australo-Papuan, that area.
Whoa, like I knew it had some of the notable members, but I did not know it had that many.
Yes, in
Wow.
fact, boas and pythons, for the most part, again, we'll get into some of the side families, but for the most part, boas and pythons don't overlap.
Yeah.
And indeed, in the Americas, where boas are in their heyday, there are no pythons, and in Australia and surrounding area, where pythons are their most diverse, there are no boas.
Huh.
And then, of course, while we're talking about the distribution, there are also pythons in Florida.
Yes.
They don't belong in Florida, but they are one of, I think, the most famous cases of an invasive species here in the United States.
Yeah.
Burmese pythons are abundant by the thousands in Florida.
Well, and it's also famous because, like, it goes back to a specific hurricane-specific warehouse of, like, how they got out.
Actually, I was listening to a podcast discussion about that recently, and apparently it isn't as clear-cut as just the one. There have been events like that certainly contributed, but it sounds like, at least from what I understand, this is a problem that was building more gradually over time.
All right.
That it's often said that it goes back to one particular hurricane.
Yeah.
But researchers suspect there were other release events that were contributing in addition to that.
Yeah, the way I had always heard it was that, like, released pets would be an issue, but it wasn't, like, breeding population issue. Mm-hmm. And then that exotic pet storehouse got hit, and that's when the problem happened. So that's interesting to know.
Yeah, there's more to the
Nuance.
story than that.
Cool.
As I understand it. Boas and pythons are, again, two different lineages, but they are both part of a group of snakes, group in quotes, called Henophidia. Henophidia isn't like one monophyletic group. It's sort of a cluster of early branching snakes. Most snake species and lineages fall within a group called Cenophidia, which are the advanced snakes, sort of the main, kind of like placental mammals are most of the mammals. The most distant outgroup of snake, the earliest branch of the snake family tree, the most distant cousins among snakes, are blind snakes, Scolecophidia, Closer in than the blind snakes, but not in the main Cenophidia group, is this cluster of other early branches of the snake family tree. That's Henophidia. It's classically called Henophidia. It's paraphyletic, but it's a bunch of groups. This cluster includes boas, pythons, and a bunch of their relatives.
Cool.
Despite being separate in their lineages, boas and pythons are often clustered together, often discussed together. They're getting an episode together because they are very similar groups of snakes.
Yep.
Both groups, as I mentioned, are tropical. Both of them range across a variety of habitats, from rainforests to savannas to deserts. Both groups include species that are mostly terrestrial, mostly ground-dwelling. Both groups have tree-dwelling species, semi-aquatic species, and semi-digging species, semi-burrowing species. Both groups also have a range of sizes. Most boas and pythons are 1 to 2 meters long, 3 to 6 feet, which is pretty typical snake size. That a lot of the famous snakes in North America are rattlesnakes and garter snakes and rat snakes or stuff are in that range.
Yeah.
1 to 2 meters. The smallest ones, there are dwarf boas and pygmy pythons in those lineages that can be as short as half a meter.
Aww.
Like a foot and a half, just little baby snakes.
Yeah.
And both groups also have several species that get quite big.
Yep.
It is fairly common in both groups to have species that grow 3 or 4 meters or more. Like 10 to 15 feet is not uncommon for these snakes, which makes them bigger already than almost every other snake species on the planet.
Yep.
And there are a handful in both groups that reach truly colossal sizes, which we will talk about later. The world's biggest snakes are found in pythons and boas.
Yep.
As with all snakes, boas and pythons are predatory. They are carnivorous. They are hunters. Boas and pythons, again, like most snakes, tend to be ambush predators or sit-and-wait predators, and they take down their prey by constricting them.
Yep.
This is one of those interesting things where, boa constrictors are named for this habit, and I've spoken to people who think of constriction as being a, thing boas and pythons do.
Mm-hmm.
They're famous for doing it. Most snakes are constrictors.
Yep.
This is not at all specific or unique to boas and pythons. I think they're perhaps the most famous ones for doing it because they're the biggest and most powerful ones that constrict.
Well, yeah, they're taking down bigger stuff with this mode.
Yeah. Most snakes that are constricting like mice.
Yeah, rodents.
Little things. A lot of boas and pythons are big enough to be taking down substantial sized prey. Incidentally, since I don't know if we've talked about it much on the podcast before, constricting, so when we say constricting, if you're unfamiliar, snakes don't have hands, so they can't hold down their prey or tear them apart, so they wrap around the prey's body and squeeze within their coils. Traditionally, it was thought that constriction killed prey by suffocating them.
Yeah.
And I've heard a number of people that repeat the idea that every time you breathe out, they squeeze a little tighter and then there's less space for you to breathe in,
Yeah.
and then eventually you suffocate.
Because your rib cage needs to expand when you breathe, and it's like if you get stuck while caving, if you get into a space so tight that your chest can't expand, you can only breathe as much as it can move.
Yes.
So you will be lacking breath.
Incidentally, recent research has found that is not apparently the case with constricting. Constriction I'm sure it does make it hard to breathe.
Oh yeah, that probably doesn't help.
Yeah. But the main effect of constricting for taking down prey is interfering with blood flow.
Yeah.
It constricts the blood vessels and such and makes it harder for blood to flow, which results in unusually low blood pressure in some places and unusually high blood pressure in other places. It leads to certain important organs not getting oxygen properly. So you get hypoxia in the liver and the heart. And eventually I read a couple of papers that looked at basically mice, lab mice, what happens to a mouse when it's being constricted by a python. And what happens is that they have a heart attack.
Yep.
Essentially. This constriction induces cardiac arrest.
Which is almost more intense than squeezing the breath out of you.
Yes.
I squeeze you so hard, your heart gives up.
Yeah, your body just falls apart.
Yeah.
You can't.
That's intense.
A lot of boas and pythons, not all of them, but a lot of them do hunt high metabolism, high blood pressure prey. Birds and mammals, right? Quote, warm-blooded animals. I've seen some discussion in papers as to whether constriction is as effective in ectothermic animals like lizards and such, who don't rely as much on their high metabolism the same way. There are boas and pythons that eat small reptiles and amphibians and insects, so obviously that's not the only thing that they can do.
Yeah. I've definitely seen a couple videos, though, of boas taking down small crocs, and the crocs still being alive when they start to be swallowed.
Yes.
So I wonder if there is a fact of, like, it'd take too long to squeeze you to death. I'm just going to overpower you.
Well, and I've heard some, I don't know how much truth there is to this, but I have heard some suspicion from researchers that boas and pythons have some ability to tell, basically, when it's time to eat the prey.
Yes.
It's like, when have I squeezed enough? When has their heart rate or whatnot stopped? And in ideal circumstances, you'd assume that they would just wait until it was over. But I absolutely assume that a bunch of the time, if it's close enough, it's time to eat.
Yep. Or if it feels like you might not have the ideal time. If there's others around, you might go, you know what? Let's just see if I can get you down, because I think I hear someone or feel someone coming.
Well, and that's a thing that is always a really interesting part of the behavior of snakes and their feeding ecology, is that especially if they've taken down something big, eating is the most vulnerable time for eating and shedding.
Yep.
Yeah. A croc can just eat something, throw it back, and swim away, or even carry it away.
Yep. And even if it's bigger than them, they can take chunks.
Yeah, and they can break off a piece of it if they need to.
So they can take a couple bites and then get chased away by the bigger croc.
If a big python takes down, like, a pig, it takes a bunch of time to kill it. It takes a bunch of time to swallow it whole. And then it takes a bunch of time to sit there and digest it.
Yep.
And they're not very mobile when that happens. They're very vulnerable.
And it's an all or nothing meal. Like, if you get chased off of that, you didn't get to have 2 or 3 bites. You know, if you start swallowing it, you can't just keep the half you got.
Yes, you eat it or you don't.
Yeah, so it's very, like, you really have to try to make sure you have time to get it down, or else you wasted all that energy to just leave that there.
Yes, I remember on one of our herping trips, we found, I think it was a garter snake, that our group found and picked it up and was, messing with it, and it threw up, I think it was a mouse or something, that it had recently eaten, which snakes will often do. I don't know if it's so much a defense mechanism as it is a, let's get this out of here so that I can more quickly get away.
It's like dropping ballast. It's we need to shed this weight because I'm burdened by this meal.
So we picked up this snake, and then it regurgitated its last meal. And I remember I felt terrible.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, man, you probably worked really hard for that.
Yep.
And now you're not getting any of that nutrition.
Like, not only can that not have been pleasant to have to throw that back up, but now you're not going to eat it again. You're going to leave. Oh.
So snakes are often picky about where they settle to eat. Like most snakes, boas and pythons are able to swallow large prey. Their skulls have a lot of joints between the bones, and and a lot of them, like the jawbones, connect way back on the skull so that they can open very wide. I'm sure I've said this before on the podcast. Snakes don't dislocate their jaw the way that we often talk about, like dislocating, like popping it out of the socket.
Yes.
Their joints are just extremely flexible, and the bones of their skull are able to expand in several directions.
Yeah, and their chin isn't fused like ours.
Yes.
So that it isn't located
yes.
to begin with.
And then they will move, they walk those jaws over whatever they're eating. Boas and pythons also are some of the few snakes on the planet that have pits.
Yeah.
Organs. Pit organs are heat-sensing organs.
They have some of my favorites.
They are so pit or heat-sensing organs are found in boas and pythons and vipers. Pit vipers.
Yep.
That's where the name comes from. Pit organs are these they're kind of like eyes. They look like a little pinhole eye. They detect light, and they actually are connected to the same nerves that other sensory organs. If I remember correctly, it's the same. It's going basically to the same place that eye nerves go to. They basically have some extra eyes.
Yes.
That are specifically tuned to absorb and detect infrared radiation. So heat sensing. Both boas and pythons have these. Usually they have labial pits, which are a row of pits. You'll see them in this little row along the lips. These can be in between the scales or within a scale.
Okay.
Some species have them on just the upper jaw. Some have them on just the lower jaw. Some have them on both. And many species of boas and pythons don't have pits. This is a very variable thing. From what I've read, it sounds like a lot of smaller species lack at least obvious pits, if not pits altogether. And also, boas don't have them. Like boa, the genus boa constrictor, and anacondas don't have pit organs.
And I remember when I first learned that some of them had pits, I was surprised, both because I knew others didn't. Like I remember that being like a fact in one of my books of like anacondas do not have this famous snake thing. But then finding out that some did and that it was not consistent also is weird to me, since it's such a famously consistent thing for pit vipers.
Yes. And in pit vipers, it is a different type of pit. So in them, they have what's called a loreal pit, which is up. I think usually it's one pit between the eye and the nostril on each side.
Yeah.
And those are, in some ways, they're a little more advanced and complex than boa and python pits. In pit vipers, I know that it's a pit. I mean, the pit is like a little cavity. And I know in pit vipers, they have an extra membrane that covers the pit.
Oh, gotcha.
So yet a little bit more eye-like
Yeah.
that they've got sort of, it's not a cornea, but it's kind of doing a similar job to it. I've also seen it suggested that pit viper pits might be more sensitive.
Yeah.
So they might be a little bit better at detecting infrared radiation. Pit organs are reported to be, generally across the board, quite sensitive. They are able to detect relatively small differences in temperature. This is useful for navigating the environment, probably useful to some degree for interacting with other snakes. Mostly it's referred to as being useful for hunting.
Yep.
Especially if you're hunting warm-bodied prey.
Yep.
Now, obviously, there are plenty of snakes that hunt warm-bodied prey without pit organs, so it's not a necessity, but I'm sure it helps.
Well, especially when it lets you do cool stuff like hunting in pitch dark.
Yes.
And in caves and in cool situations like that.
Yeah, a bunch of snakes are, because they follow a whole bunch of senses that we just don't really have a direct comparison for, because their predominant senses that they're tracking their prey with in most snakes are the tongue, which is kind of smelling and kind of tasting, and in these, heat trails.
Yep.
So it's not just, and this is something that they've been observed doing, it isn't just that they can look out in front of them and see, oh, that's where the mouse is. They can detect the heat trail.
Yeah.
A mouse walked by here, I can tell because it's a little warmer in this area, and I can follow that heat signature as it gets stronger to track down where this mouse went.
It's like they're just in so many ways so much like predators, and it's so great.
Predators from the movie.
Yep, predators
Get
from
to
the movie.
chopper.
Yep. They've got jaw that swings outward. They've got heat vision.
They hunt in the jungles.
Yep. They only attack you if you're carrying a weapon. It's
That's true. They make those clicking noises.
Want some candy?
Interstellar. Right? They came here from space. Little known when we get to the origins. Little known fact.
Spoilers.
Boas and pythons. Aliens. They are not aliens. They are unusual snakes, though. The next part here, I'm segueing. Because they are an early couple of branches on the snake family tree, they have a few features that aren't seen in the more advanced, the later diverging snakes. Most famously, boas and pythons both exhibit remains of the hind legs.
Yeah.
This is something we've absolutely mentioned before. If you ever get the chance to hang out with a boa or a python, especially a male boa or python, on either side of the cloaca, their exit hole, there are these little claw-like things, what are called spurs.
Yeah.
Cloacal spurs or pelvic spurs. The bone in there is limb bones. It's the vestiges of the ancestral legs from snake ancestry. Both boas and pythons have remnants of the pelvis and those little spurs. Those spurs appear to be useful I know males will like scrape against each other with them. They tend to be larger in males than in females, so it follows to reason that this is something males are using to fight against each other.
I've heard descriptions of them maybe using it to like tickle the female into position.
Oh yeah,
like to like interact and stimulate the female.
That this is they're using it to interact with each other.
Yes.
They're not particularly weapon-like.
No.
They're not particularly sharp.
Well, it's like it's the most comparable I can think to give you an idea for people trying to picture it is it's just like the last little digit of your finger. It's not much. It's just this little.
It's like a little dew claw.
Yes, dew claw is a very good comparison.
More like on a dog.
Yep.
Because a cat's dew claw can be very sharp. It's like a little dog dew claw. It's just like a little blunt claw.
Yeah, but they're mobile. I've seen videos of them like whoop 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 swinging them. They still have musculature. They still can move.
Yep. Most snakes, the Cenophidian snakes, completely lack any sign of limbs at all. Boas and pythons both have vestiges of those hind limbs. They also tend to have 2 lungs.
Oh, right.
So snakes are tube-shaped, and most of their paired organs, kidneys and gonads and such, instead of being side by side like in us regular animals, they are one in front of the other. Snake lungs, most snakes have not only put one lung in front of the other, but the left lung is tiny and vestigial, sometimes I think even completely absent.
Yeah.
They're only using the right lung to breathe. A lot of modern snakes also have the trachea has expanded into a sort of a pseudo extra lung shape, the tracheal lung.
Well, it's kind of like the throat breathing that monitor lizards, where they're able to pump air in that area.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Interesting.
Boas and pythons often have a functional right lung and a large functional left lung as well. In some species, the left lung can be reportedly up to 75% the size of the right lung.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty comparable.
Basically 2 lungs, and the size varies among the species. But these are, it's very funny that, boas and pythons are weird snakes because they have 2 working lungs.
What? This is bizarre. How 2? What are you going to do with both of those?
So boas and pythons, extremely similar groups to each other. Some of that is because of their ancestry. Some of that is they have just developed similarly. The major differences between the group, one I've already mentioned, is their distribution. They are generally found in different places. Boas don't have premaxillary teeth.
Oh.
So in snakes, there are teeth on a lot of the bones of the jaw. The lower jaw on the dentary, the upper jaw on the maxilla. They also often have teeth on like the palatal and the roof of the mouth. The premaxilla are a pair of bones right up at the front. If we had, separate premaxillae, it'd be right under our noses.
Yes.
In boas, there are no premaxillary teeth, and in pythons, there are premaxillary teeth. So if you get bitten by a big snake and you don't know if it was a boa or a python, look at the pattern of the teeth.
Yes.
And if there's a row of teeth right up in the front in the middle.
If you were slightly more bit.
Yeah, if you got bit a little more.
Yeah.
Python.
You'll have to get bit by both to be able to tell the difference.
That's true. You're going to have to do some experimenting.
You won't know what the average amount of bit is. Very interesting.
The other difference, and a more famous difference, between boas and pythons is that, generally speaking, boas give live birth, pythons lay eggs.
Right, I forgot that.
Boas are, with a few nearby exceptions, live bearers. Pythons are all egg layers. Pythons are also noted for taking care of their nests.
Yeah.
A lot of species of pythons will lay a nest of eggs and coil around the eggs protectively. So they're kind of making a nest of their body around the eggs.
It's when you see it, it's one of those things where it looks like something that would have been drawn for a cartoon.
Yes.
But it's just so picturesque and awesome.
Yeah, and it's just super cute.
Super cute.
Some species, this has been noted specifically in Indian pythons, will properly brood their nest. So in chickens, we think about this with birds who will sit on their nest to keep the eggs warm.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the reasons why birds are able to breed in cold areas, because they can keep the eggs warm with their bodies. Snakes do not have high body temperatures naturally. Their body temperature is whatever the temperature of the environment is, which means that it's going to be the same as whatever the eggs is. Certain pythons, like Indian pythons, will coil around their eggs and shiver to generate heat.
Yeah.
We talked about this in episode 179 when we talked about thermoregulation. They activate the muscles. They do little spasms of the muscles like shivering in us, and that warms them up and helps keep the eggs warm.
Because that's, in case you're wondering, that's why we shiver, is because you're getting cold, and so it's like, let's get some friction and let's get some metabolic action going just to keep the body a little bit better temperature. You can do that even if you're not a warm-blooded animal.
Yes. So yeah, when we can shiver on command,
yes,
like
exactly.
You can make yourself shiver, these snakes can shiver for the purpose of keeping their eggs warm.
Which is very cool.
Very cool stuff. As I said, a lot of what boas and pythons have in common is because they are both in a similar corner of the snake family tree. They are also, being two separate groups, notable for how convergent they are with each other. Both groups are surprisingly similar. They have evolved very similar habits and anatomy multiple times. As I mentioned, both groups have species that are ground-dwelling, tree-dwelling, swimming, and digging. Both groups range from tiny to huge. Within these groups, there's a lot of examples of striking convergence. One of the most famous examples of this is between green tree pythons, which live in the Indonesia-Australia region, and emerald tree boas, which live in South America. Green tree pythons and emerald tree boas are both bright green with white spots or stripes or splotches. Both are tree-dwelling, and both do that draped over the tree posture.
Yeah.
Like if you Google an image of a tree python, you'll see them do that like you draped a pizza
Yes.
over a tree branch.
Yeah, they coil up in a spiral. Like if you were to coil a rope up in a spiral and then drape it over
with the head right in the
shower
middle.
rack.
Yes, they both do that exact same thing. And they both change color when they get older.
Oh.
Young start out as red to orange in the boas, or red or yellow in the pythons, and then turn green when they become adults.
Neat.
So tree pythons and tree boas, these two species are almost the same thing.
Yes.
But two different lineages, two different continents.
Very cool.
Some research has looked into convergence patterns and found that there's a lot of anatomical convergence related to habitat and lifestyle, especially in the shape of the head. Burrowing pythons and burrowing boas tend to have a very similar head shape. Same thing with the tree dwellers. Both groups have aquatic species that tend to have a more streamlined head shape, and the eyes tend to be positioned a little higher up on the skull.
Makes sense.
You see this in water pythons in Australia, and very notably in anacondas. Anacondas, being boas, are South American. And if you look at a picture of an anaconda, their eyes are almost comically high up on the head. They're towards flounder territory. The eyes are weirdly close together.
Yes.
So not only are both groups doing a lot of the same things, they're also evolving a lot of similar features. Hence why it makes sense to talk about them in the same episode like this.
Justified.
Now, I mentioned that pythons have a family, Pythonidae, and boas have a family, Boidae, and they are in larger lineages, superfamilies, pythonoids and booids. They are not alone in those lineages. Taxonomically, they have some relatives that I think are important to mention here because A, some of it's confusing, and B, some of those relatives are also called boas and pythons.
Oh, yeah.
The superfamily Pythonoidea includes pythons, Pythonidae, all the pythons that we've mentioned so far. Their close relatives are two families, Xenopeltidae, which are sunbeam snakes, the genus Xenopeltis. These are called that because they have these iridescent scales. They're very pretty snakes.
That they shoot sunbeams
They shoot sunbeams, absolutely. These are from Southeast Asia, coexisting with true pythons. And the other group in pythonoids is Loxosemidae, the genus Loxosemus, which are Mexican burrowing pythons,
Oh.
which live in Mexico and Central America, which is the wrong part of the world.
Yep.
That's not where pythons are supposed to be. This is the weird geographic offshoot for the python superfamily.
And these are different than sand boas?
And these are different from sand boas.
Okay, yeah. I was like, is this just a name getting conflated?
Nope. We'll get to
Interesting.
sand boas.
Yeah. Huh.
Because those are different. Pythons, sunbeam snakes, and the Mexican burrowing pythons all make up pythonoids. These other two groups outside of true pythons, both are small snakes. These are typically under 1 meter, so just a couple of feet long. Both lack pit organs.
Mm-hmm.
But I have seen it noted that the burrowing pythons in Mexico have pelvic remnants, and the sunbeam snakes have a large left lung.
Interesting.
I didn't see it noted if they also have the other thing.
Yes, yes.
So that I don't know, but there is at least some of that large extra lung and remnants of the pelvis.
Cool.
The other side of the equation is the booids. Now, within the booid lineage, there is the family Boidae, and sometimes the subfamily Boinae. I have seen it described both ways. These are the true boas. All the ones we've talked about so far, Central and South America, your boa constrictors and your tree boas and your anacondas and such, those are all true boas. Then there are a series of other lineages that sometimes have been resolved as within the boid family, as subfamilies. Other times I've seen them resolved as separate families.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
This seems to depend on different studies. Either way, these are a series of lineages that are extremely close to the true boas, which we could maybe call boas or not technically, and many of which are called boas commonly.
Yeah.
These include Ungalliophinae, the neotropical dwarf boas of Central and South America, Carininae, which are rosy boas and rubber boas,
Oh, hey, yeah.
which live in western North America, Ericinae, sand boas,
Yay.
which live in Eurasia.
I didn't know that.
They are old world.
Oh.
They're over on the other side of the world hanging out with all the pythons.
And very cute.
Super cute.
It's ridiculously cute.
Sanzinianae, Madagascar boas. I think a couple of species specific to Madagascar. Again, wrong side of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Candoianae, the genus Candoia. Bevel-nosed boas in Indonesia and Melanesia. And my favorite one, Calabarianae, the genus Calabaria. Calabar pythons. One species that lives in West and Central Africa that was formerly classified under Pythonidae.
Yes.
And isn't.
Yep.
It's a boa, actually. Interestingly enough, the Calabar pythons, despite being on the boa side, are egg layers.
Oh.
So they are, you can understand why
Yes.
people thought they were pythons. They're weird. They're doing a weird thing.
They given some false signals there. Very interesting distribution.
So this is a series of boas just outside of the true sort of core boas. Again, most of these are pretty small. Most of these are 1 to 2 meters long. The dwarf boas can be even smaller than that, and the Madagascar boas I've seen cited as sometimes getting as big as 3 meters.
Okay.
But typically these are, 4, 5, 6 foot long snakes. And yeah, if we expand to this extra group of boas, now we have some in the old world. They're not just American.
Yeah.
And then there are several other lineages that are either within the booid lineage or close to booids.
Mm-hmm.
These I've seen go back and forth quite a bit. The problem here is that all of these things were once considered Boidae, as far as I know, and gradually over time, as our evidence has gotten better, we've been separating various groups out. So what still counts as within boids and booids is a little bit back and forth over time.
Yeah, we're still sorting through the group to...
This is why pythons have a nice little set that I was able to discuss in 2 minutes, because they got separated out and sorted.
Yes.
But there are a series of other lineages that are either on the booid lineage, near the booid lineage, or at least some of these might be pythonoids. They're close. These include Boleriidae, the round island boas, which are species that live in Mauritius and nearby islands. At least one of these is a recently extinct species.
Bummer.
Xenophiidae, the genus Xenophiodon, spine-jaw snakes,
Whoa, cool.
known from Borneo and Malaysia. Shield-tail snakes and pipe snakes, which are both found in southern and Southeast Asia. Shield-tail snakes crawl into burrows, and then they have a little, like, blunt tail that they use to block the entrance.
I don't remember when I learned about, but I learned about those fairly recent, like within the last handful of years, and that was one of those of like, what?
Yep.
What? That's
They do the ant thing.
what?
Those are all Old World, and then there's Tropidophiidae, another group called dwarf boas, which includes eyelash boas and wood snakes, which are Central and South American, and Aniliidae, which are American pipe snakes in South America.
Cool.
All of these are small snakes, typically less than 1 meter or 3 feet long, and variably among the groups, some of them have pelvic remains and little spurs, some of them have that functional left lung, and some of them don't. These are features that sort of vary from group to group.
Interesting.
So within this Henophidian cluster, there's pythons and their close relatives, and there's boas, and then there's a bunch of also boas and near boas, and then some things that are kind of called boas or not boas that are relatives of both. Most of those side groups that I just mentioned are a handful of species. Like, most of them are like 4 or 6 species in each of those lineages. Some of them, like the sand boas, I think those have like 20 species in them. But most of the diversity in these clusters are the true boas and the true pythons.
Very neat. It's also interesting that those surrounding groups are typically not reaching the sizes that the main groups are so famous for.
They're usually pretty small.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I also want to make sure we talk about gigantism in snakes.
I was so hoping that was the next category. When I was like, I want to make this point, and I feel like we're probably getting to this point in the conversation. So this, if it's true, this will be a perfect segue.
Giants.
Yep.
Because this is the thing that boas and pythons are probably most famous for. They get real big.
Well, these are groups where, unless you're a person who like has had a ball python and like familiar with that, I think most people, this is what they think boas and pythons are big snakes.
I assume that it's surprising to hear that most boas and python species aren't gigantic.
Yeah, are moderate sized.
Yes. So when we think about, like, here in North America, most of our snakes range from tiny little worm snakes up to, 5-6 feet. I think the record largest native species in North America are like 7, maybe 8 feet long.
Mm-hmm.
Our snakes tend to be 1 to 2 meters. That's pretty common for snakes around the world. It is also the most common for boas and pythons and the other snakes that are related to them, 3, 4, 5, 6 feet long. A bunch of species of boas and pythons are known to grow 3 to 4 meters long, 10 to 13 feet. So that's pretty typical for a bunch of species, already beating the record for basically any North American snake.
Yep.
There are a handful of species that will get bigger than that. 4, 5 meters, 15-foot snakes are not uncommon for a number of species. And there are a short list of species, 6 as of the most recent thing that I've read about it, that are commonly cited as giant snakes.
Yeah.
These, at least in the couple of scientific texts that have been written specifically about giant snakes, which, as far as I can tell, are all written by the same person.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That person's distinguishing note for giant snakes is snakes that grow 6 meters or longer. 6 meters is 20 feet long.
Yep.
There are 6 species known to either reach or exceed 6 meters long. Scrub pythons in Australia, Morelia kinghorni, Central and Southern African rock pythons, Python sebe and Python natalensis, which are Central and Southern Africa. Over in Southeast Asia, Python bivitatus, Burmese pythons. So a great one to put invasive in your other country.
Hey, we spared no expense.
Also in Southeast Asia, Malayo-Python reticulatus, reticulated pythons, which are commonly cited as the longest snakes in the world. More on that in a second. And in the boas, over here in the Americas, Eunectes murinus, green anacondas.
Yeah.
All of these species have documented sizes around 6 meters, 20 feet long. There are other species that are thought to get close to this, but these are kind of the big six. There are tons of stories of extra large snakes. I did a whole deep dive into this looking for like record. When you go deep dive looking for records of giant snakes, you very quickly end up leaving scientific literature and going to like the Guinness Book of World Records and stuff. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't actually matter how big snakes get.
Yeah.
Like the difference between a 20-foot and a 25-foot snake biologically is not actually particularly relevant.
Well, it's like what we talked about with dinosaurs when it's like, well, Giganotosaurus is estimated to maybe be like 3 feet longer than T-Rex. Like, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference if you saw both of those at the zoo.
That's the same. That's the same size.
That's the same size.
So what is the actual biggest snake is more of a question for entertainment purposes than for strict scientific purposes. That being said, it's also really cool to know.
Yeah.
So there are reasonably reliable records, at least one reasonably reliable record of an anaconda measured at almost 8 meters, around 25 feet long. And the largest weight record I've seen for anacondas is around 200 kilograms or 440 pounds.
Ugh.
That's a quarter ton of snake.
Yep.
Anacondas are, without question, the largest snakes in the world.
Yep. Most massive.
Yeah, the heavy, they reach the most mass. There are at least a few reasonably reliable records of reticulated pythons also getting up to almost or near 8 meters or 25 feet long. The Guinness Book of World Records currently lists the record is a snake in captivity in Kansas City named Medusa, who is reportedly 25 feet long. There was also a snake, I think this was the early 1900s, named Samantha at the Bronx Zoo, which also was reported to, I think, 26 feet long. Both reticulated pythons. 15 feet is a preposterously large snake.
No, that is a very, very long animal.
The fact that there are at least 2 species known to reach 25 feet, 8 meters, is huge. There are reports of snakes larger than that. There are lots of stories of snakes larger than that. They are often repeated, but those stories tend to be questionable or lacking documentation. You'll often hear reticulated pythons cited as growing up to 32 feet, 10 meters. That seems to come from one story from an Indonesian snake that some researchers have pointed out there are some inconsistencies in that story, that it might not quite be accurate.
Yeah.
There was also a reticulated python, I think this was in Texas, named Colossus, who was reported at 28 feet long, so almost 30. But a paper came out in 2012 that did some digging and found that Colossus's skeleton ended up in a museum, and the museum records say that his skeleton was only 21 feet long.
Yeah, yep.
So perhaps not as long as reported, which is not to diminish the fact that this was a 21-foot-long snake.
No, absolutely.
That's preposterous.
But you get this a lot with animals that get big, like sharks get this, crocs
This happens
get
with crocs,
this,
absolutely.
Yep. And a lot of times it will be reported on site by the people who caught it or whatever as one length, and then either when it gets measured another time, it's a different length, or the specimen never makes it to other officials to do a more clinical measuring of the animal. And so there's tons of those of like reported lengths of, but never confirmed or not able to be confirmed.
Now, it's possible some of these snakes are getting larger than 25 feet.
Yeah. There's nothing that makes us say it's like there's no way they could do that.
Yes. There are stories of snakes at like 40 and 50 and 100 feet long, which those are now stretching credulity.
Yes.
But, yeah, anacondas and reticulated pythons for sure are getting up to at least near 25 feet long, 8 meters long. It is also important to note, as we read off these numbers, these are unusual excessive sizes.
Yes.
You'll often hear it written as like, reticulated pythons grow up to 25 feet long, which is kind of like saying human beings grow up to 8 feet tall.
That is always the best example, because yes, we have found members who got that big, That is not actually helpful to give you an idea of what this animal's typically
That
like.
is not a typical, like if aliens had a guidebook for Earth and they're like, yes, human beings range from 3 to 8 feet tall. And
Yep.
It's like, yeah, but that's not actually giving you a very good idea of human sizes.
Very disappointed alien tourists when they start walking around our cities.
We're all 5 and 6
Yep.
feet tall. Now, what is interesting about these giant sizes is that is several species that are not all related to each other.
Yep.
In fact, that is 2 different major groups, boas and pythons, 4 different genera, and 5 different lineages.
Yep.
Which means that those colossal sizes have evolved over and over again among these snakes.
Which is, it makes the lack of big snakes and their relatives make a little bit more sense, that this doesn't seem to be a thing of these groups that just is a trait they all share.
Yes.
It is something they're good at doing, evidently, but it has shown up on its own. So these are, anomaly feels like not quite the right word, but they're
exceptions.
Notable exceptions, yes.
Yeah. Well, it's like fish.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, there are tons of different groups of fish that have grown up to giant sizes, but most fish are not gigantic.
Exactly.
Fish. Most of these species are regularly hitting like 12, 16 feet long, which is huge, and some of them will put on another 10 feet on top of that.
They feel like it.
What's interesting, this has attracted a bunch of attention for researchers who are curious about how and why are you getting as big as you are. One of the things we've mentioned with snakes before, snakes across the board, generally the longer a snake is correlates with how many vertebrae it has.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Snakes tend, over their evolutionary history, to get longer by adding more vertebrae. That, apparently, is not consistent in boas and pythons.
Interesting.
That a lot of the biggest boas and pythons are longer than we would expect with their number of vertebrae.
Oh.
So it's not just that they're adding vertebrae, they are also growing bigger. This seems to be not just about lengthening the spine, but changing their developmental pattern. Boas and pythons, especially the big ones, tend to grow fast.
Yeah.
And they grow faster and get bigger based on environmental circumstances. This is one of the reasons why the same species of snake can range from 10 to 20 feet long, because if their early years they don't have a lot of food available, they won't get as big.
Yes.
But if there is plentiful food, they'll grow faster and then set themselves up for reaching a larger size later in life.
And in both those situations, be perfectly healthy.
Yes.
They won't be stunted or malnourished.
They're just smaller.
They're just smaller. But they're going to be doing perfectly fine. They may even live exactly as long as the giant member.
Yes. This is why it can be so difficult to get a sense of size. This is the same thing with crocs.
Yep.
This is very common in reptiles in general. They don't have like a typical size the way that we think of with mammals and birds. They have a range of sizes, and depending on how their life goes, they will be somewhere in that range.
Yeah, so like the average range, the average sizes will more depend on where you're looking at them, like what part of the world or what environment.
Year, what year they were born.
Exactly.
Yes. Obviously, thinking evolutionarily, there are benefits to growing huge.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense why this might happen over and over again. One is defensive. It's harder to eat a reticulated python than it is to eat a ball python. They are also able to eat larger prey. Boas and pythons are often among the largest predators in their environments.
Mm-hmm.
These specific species are like green anacondas are one of the absolute largest predators in their habitat.
Yep.
These largest pythons and boas have been documented eating large, deer and pigs and stuff. There are documentations of species eating crocodiles, big cats. Like I've seen tigers listed as documented prey of certain pythons.
Which is the animal that just should always unnerve you if it's on someone's menu.
Yeah, that you don't want to mess with that.
No, that's a tiger.
And there are a few large species of pythons and boas documented eating humans.
Yep.
Typically, sadly, these are children.
Yes.
That are eaten by these large snakes. There are documented cases of attacks and even eatings on adult humans. This isn't super common.
Mm-hmm.
We are not the regular prey for any of these animals, but it does happen. There are a few examples of this.
Yeah.
All in all, very impressive, very exciting group of snakes. There are well over 100 species within this. I can't do what Will did in his alligators episode and just describe every single species. So if you want to learn more about the species, listen, we're all over the place. We got tons of species of snakes. There are so many species of these. If you want to learn more specifics about them, go look into them. I wish that I could go through and list every single species.
Right.
But let us move on from questions about modern boas and pythons into our break and a little musical interlude, and then return to talk about the fossil record, where we will find even more surprises, even more cool snakes, and even bigger boas and pythons.
Yeah.
Molecular clock estimates, that is, comparing genetic information and estimating evolutionary trends, suggest that the booid and pythonoid lineages split from each other sometime in the late, maybe middle Cretaceous.
All right.
So somewhere in that, 70, 80, 90 million years ago or so is probably when these groups split. There have been potential fossils identified from the Cretaceous, but they are unclear. They are not definitive. Mm-hmm. We don't have any definite boas and pythons from the Cretaceous period. That said, once we move into the Cenozoic, the last 66 million years, boa and python fossils become pretty common and widespread, especially as we get a little bit later into the era. As is the case with most snakes, boas and pythons are typically represented by individual vertebrae.
Yep.
That is what the snake fossil record mostly is one vertebra at a time. There are, however, some exceptional fossil specimens and a handful of exceptional fossil sites.
Yes.
Many of the oldest and best known fossil members of both groups are from the Eocene of Europe, specifically sites in Germany, France, and England. Reportedly, the best site in the world for fossil boas and pythons is the Messel Pit in Germany.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Episode 160, the Messel Pit is in Germany. It is a lake deposit. Like I said, episode 160, check it out. Eocene epoch around 48 million years ago. The Messel Pit is home to Messalopython, which is a pythonid, and Eoconstrictor, which is a boa. Eoconstrictor has actually been identified as a boine within the subfamily, which is today the group that is all in the Americas.
Cool.
Which means not only that the Messel Pit has some of the oldest members of both true pythons and true boas, but it has true pythons and true boas at the same site.
Yep.
Which is a thing that doesn't happen in the world today, which is very cool. Also at the Messel Pit is Messelophus and Rapalophus, which are small booids, which are possibly related to the Ungaliophenes, which are the dwarf boas of the Americas today. Again, American group with relatives over in Eocene Europe. Also there is Ragerix, which is a carinine, which is the group that has rosy boas and rubber boas.
Yeah.
Also here in North America.
Interesting.
Many of these are known from exceptional complete specimens. Eoconstrictor especially, there's a bunch of really lovely complete skeletons. These fossils come in a variety of sizes. Some of them are small. Eoconstrictor grows over 2 meters long, so a good-sized snake. Several of them are interpreted as ground-dwelling, like most boas and pythons today. Messelophus has been noted to have a particularly long tail, so might be arboreal, a tree dweller.
Yeah.
That's a thing we see in tree dwellers a bunch. Eoconstrictor has had identified evidence of pits on the jaw, the pit organs. There are foramina that seem to indicate where the pits would be, just on the upper jaw,
Cool.
like some modern species. And Eoconstrictor, there are a number of specimens with gut contents.
Yeah.
2 notable mentions. One that is, and isn't this just the most poetic for croc and snake month, an alligatorid,
Yep.
probably Diplocynodon, inside the belly of one of these Eoconstrictor boas. And the other one is one of my absolute favorite fossils of all time. I have mentioned this before. It is an eoconstrictor skeleton. In its gut is the remains of a lizard, a basilisk lizard, and in the lizard are the remains of a bug.
Yeah.
A little beetle. It is one of like 3 examples in the world of a 3-in-1 gut contents fossil.
A Boas insectuckin.
Yes. So the Messel pit has a assemblage, a variety of python and boid or close to boid, in boid lineages, a bunch of which are related to groups that today are American groups. Other sites in Eocene Europe include the boid Phosphoroboa in France, Paleopython, which is known for many complete skeletons, and Palarix, which are both... the most recent stuff that I've seen says that they're not booids, but they're not necessarily pythonids either, so they're somewhere in this group. So, Eocene Europe, great place for fossil pythons and boas.
This is always something that's fun with the fossil record, but it's like, not only do we have cool mixture in like groups found in places they're not now, but Europe being known for a diversity of pythons and boas is not something you typically think of it as.
Nope. But the one site in the fossil record, in period, where we have true boas and true pythons apparently together, is a place where neither group lives today.
Yeah.
Very weird. Now, this is relevant in interpreting sort of where different groups evolved and how they moved around over time. The fact that there's a bunch in Europe might indicate Europe was an important place in their evolutionary history, but it is also always valuable and important to remember that Europe is also where most of the paleontology has taken place.
Yep.
And when paleontology is new to a country or continent, snakes are not typically high on their list of things to document in detail. So it's very possible that there is just a horde of snakes from other parts of the world that haven't been found yet. But at least for now, Europe is one of the best places in the world for studying early boas and pythons.
Cool.
Moving down through time, staying in the old world, in the Oligocene through the Miocene, so, 35 through, 5-10 million years ago, python fossils are known from all over the old world. There are pythons in Africa, the Middle East, Asia, Australia. They continue to be present in Europe in weird python places like France and Greece. The modern genus Morelia, which includes modern tree pythons and carpet pythons in Australia, is known as far back as the late Oligocene and early Miocene in Australia. The genus Python is known from fossils in the Miocene of Europe, which again, odd place to find pythons. One particular species, Python euboicus, was found in the Miocene of Greece, known from a actually pretty good skeletal remains, a partial skeleton with 25 vertebrae, several ribs, and a partial jaw. That specimen has since been lost.
Oh.
Yep.
You have made me so happy.
Yeah, no, listen, this is it. This is the reality of paleontology.
You all didn't get to see the big smile that was on my face that then just got wiped away.
Sometimes you lose a snake.
Ugh.
Also common in the Oligocene through Miocene of the Old World, boas.
Yeah.
Boas are known in Europe, Asia, and Africa throughout this time period. This includes Ericine boas, the sand boa lineage, which are in those areas today, as well as other snakes that have been identified as true boas, which are, again, today American, as are American dwarf boas and pipe snakes. Mm-hmm. There are also some relatives of theirs in the Old World as well. So for much of the Cenozoic, it looks like there were representatives of, most of our Old World boas and pythons are present in the fossil record of the Old World, but also a handful of our modern American lineages made it over to the Old World at some point.
Yeah.
Moving over to the Americas, there is also a substantial fossil record of these groups. In fact, the oldest boas are known from South America, from the Eocene and even the Paleocene.
Ooh.
The modern genera Corylus, which includes your tree boas, and boa, which includes today your boa constrictor and such. Those two genera are both known from fossils as far back as the Eocene in Brazil and Argentina. The oldest known boa period True boa, but also boa in general, comes from the Middle Paleocene, 60 million years ago in Colombia. That's Titanoboa.
Woo!
The oldest known boa. I am not going to talk about Titanoboa very much right now. We'll get to it. Outside of those, anaconda fossils, the genus Eunectes that anacondas are in, also goes back to the Miocene in Brazil and Colombia. So we've got a bunch of modern groups going back to the Miocene and some to the Eocene of American boas.
Neat. But no pythons.
No pythons.
No pythons.
There are not pythons down there. In North America, we've got ancient relatives of rubber boas and rosy boas as far back as the Oligocene, calamagrass, and taraga boa. There are also true boas, boeens, from Florida in the fossil record, including boa. The genus boa has been identified at some sites in Florida. So it seems they made it a bit further north. One of those sites is Thomas Farm, I think, which is the a Miocene site. That's the other taper site besides the gray fossil site. And, since you mentioned it, Ogmophis is a genus of snake identified as a loxoscimid, which is the family of the Mexican burrowing pythons, as far back as the Oligocene in North America.
Okay.
So there are pythonoids here, but it's the same group that is here in the Americas today.
Interesting. It's very intriguing that it's not just a case of, the distribution today doesn't represent the fossil one, and they used to be just spread more around, but that some of them were more spread. Others seem to more or less the fossil record be where they are found today.
Yeah, it is an interesting set of evidence to try to interpret the history of these groups. Researchers have noted that the burrowing python lineage today is in North America. We've got those fossils from North America. And now the oldest true pythons over in the Mesolpit, that's all northern continents.
Yep.
Which has led some to suspect that this is a group that started out in northern continents, apparently either stayed mostly over in the old world and only came over to the Americas maybe that one time, or if they were in the Americas, they either weren't here very long or have somehow avoided the fossil record.
Yes. They all lived in cacti.
They all lived in cacti, and there's no fossil record.
We have no record of the cactus python.
Boas are a little bit of a trickier one because we have evidently true boas in Eocene Europe, but we also have a true boa in Paleocene Colombia.
Yeah.
So when Eoconstrictor was described in one of those studies, I know there was some speculation that does this mean that did boas and pythons both start in Europe or in the northern continents and then spread? But I have seen some researchers also posit that it's very possible boas have always been an American thing and they've made it over to Europe and the old world at some points in their history. So this is a very ancient group, and they're very widespread, and their fossil record is very widespread. So there have apparently been multiple dispersal events across the continents over time to spread boas around the world.
Yeah. It's always a fun bit of a puzzle when you have situations like this where we know that you had to be spreading to some of these areas, and some of these had to be one-off events, but which direction it was happening can often be difficult to tell.
And did you go over a land connection? Did you get swept across the ocean at some point? Those are tough. Those are tough to tell. We need more snake fossils.
Yep.
It's exciting to find animals in places that they aren't today, because that hints at their past distribution. It also emphasizes this interesting question of where boas and pythons are separated from each other. The true boas and true pythons, even in the fossil record, are rarely in the same place.
Yes.
Today, they're not. There are some of those sort of smaller, slightly more outgroups of boas that do live in the same general regions. Australia is the realm of pythons, and the Americas are the realm of boas today. And that could be the result. That's just how the dispersal worked out. That boas just never made it over to Australia for some reason, and vice versa. Or it could be that by the time they made it over there were too many pythons over
Yeah.
there. Like now there's a monopoly in those areas that one lineage already has.
Yeah, it's very intriguing, and you know, this comes up when we come across all sorts of things of when nowadays there's one, you know, example of you here, but there used to be 3 different kinds or 3 different shapes of you, which makes it all the more interesting that they don't seem to overlap. It seems like in those times when they were more diverse, then having a boa and a python in places wouldn't be that big a deal.
Yeah. Well, there are tons of places today where there are multiple species of boa and python.
Yeah.
Like multiple pythons and multiple boas
Exactly.
coexisting. And they're so similar that you'd think that, well, yeah, if you can have multiple pythons, why not have boa and python?
Exactly. If you can have a python of this size, why couldn't one of those sizes be a boa?
Yes.
But the fact that they don't is very intriguing.
You need premaxillary teeth to hunt
Yes.
in the old world.
They're nipping at stuff.
There's just a little bit too... No, there's too much space there. Everything's escaping. Now, when we discuss the fossil record of boas and pythons, as we did at the top of half of the episode, where we had to talk about giants, we will also talk about giants in the fossil record. There are giant fossil snakes in the fossil record, including pythons and boas.
Yeah.
Let's start with pythons. I mentioned the genus Paleopython. There are multiple species. Paleopython used to be like the python genus, or, you know, something close to boas and pythons, across Europe. And over time, it has been shrunken. Like Eoconstrictor used to be grouped under Paleopython. So Paleopython's gotten broken up a bit. There is at least one vertebra I've seen noted from the France. This is the Phosphorus site in Quercy in France that has been noted as quite large, possibly a snake of several meters long.
Nice.
So this could be getting to the size of our modern giant snakes, if not bigger. And that's the Eocene, as with those other snakes. One of the most famous examples is the Riversley python, Morelia riversleensis, which comes from Oligocene and Miocene deposits in Queensland, in Australia. This is a snake that has been estimated from its fossil remains to have grown 6 meters or more.
Nice.
20 feet or more, giant size, like the big pythons that we have today. This is interesting because this is the genus that modern carpet pythons and tree pythons are in, which is not one of the genera that today gets to those sizes, even in Australia. So this is yet another evolution of giant size. Fun fact about Morelia riversleensis, originally when it was identified, it was given its own genus name, and that genus was Monty Pythonoides. Because I don't know if it was an Australian who named it, but it sounds like something an Australian might do.
Yep.
Sounds like that sort of down under sense of humor.
Sorry, your cool species name got synonymized or...
So sorry.
No.
It's going to turn out it was an English researcher and we're going to get yelled at by Australians. It's like, wow, we would have named it after something Australian. That's probably fair. There's also in Australia, the Bluff Downs python, Liasis dubadingala, from northeastern Queensland, another Queensland one. The Bluff Downs local fauna, which is early Pliocene, so, 4 or 5 million years old, not terribly long ago. Liasis is the same genus as modern water pythons and olive pythons down in Australia. Again, different genus than what gets huge today. This one is actually known from an assemblage of vertebrae, ribs, a number of teeth, at least one dentary, part of the lower jaw, so a fair amount of remains. The largest vertebra reported on this snake is about 6 centimeters wide. Now, I prepared for this.
Yeah.
I have held in my hand the largest vertebrae of a 10-foot-long Burmese python.
Mm-hmm.
The largest vertebra in a 10-foot-long Burmese python is about 2.5 centimeters long.
Yep.
So, a little longer, wider than my thumb, an inch long. This animal's vertebra is up to 6 centimeters wide for an estimated total length of over 8 meters.
Yeah.
Or 25, 26 feet, which, if that's accurate, that puts this on par with the largest recorded snakes on record today. This makes it the largest known snake in Australia.
Yep.
In the fossil record or modern in Australia. That same fossil locality also has 3 croc species and a giant varanid. I assume they're referring to Megalania.
Yes.
Although it could be something else. So this was just a place with a lot of big reptiles.
It's just
apparently.
one of the coolest places on Earth.
This is the place we want to go to.
In Earth history.
Go find that Bluff Downs python. Interestingly enough, these are not the only giant snakes that have ever lived in Australia. This episode is about boas and pythons, which are the world's two big famous groups of often large-bodied, early branching snakes. But they are not the only groups that have done that. We've talked before about Madsoids.
Yeah.
Madsoidae is an extinct lineage of snakes, even earlier branching than boas and pythons, which lived from the Cretaceous all the way to the late Ice Age, very recently, which also had a number of very large members. In Australia, for example, there was Yerlinger and Wonambi, both of which have been estimated to reach sizes of 6 meters or more, potentially, both of which are also known from Riversley. So these snakes, at least some species of these snakes, may have overlapped with one of these giant pythons.
Very cool.
The Riversley python, Monty Pythonoides, which isn't its name anymore. So there may have been, this may be another place where you had multiple families of giant snakes in the same place.
Very cool.
So we've got at least a couple of fossil species from Australia that were similarly sized to the giantest snakes that we have today. Not to be outdone, there are also some big boas to talk about. I did see at least one reference to one or more vertebrae that seemed to be from an anaconda. That seems like it might have been a size comparable to some of the larger anacondas today. There's also Chubatophus grandis, which is a boine identified as within the true boas, from the Sarmiento Formation of Argentina, early Eocene, so, we're back 40 to 50 million years ago, described from a single vertebra. That vertebra is about 4 centimeters wide, so, a little more than almost twice as wide as my 10-foot Burmese python, but the researchers described that it was apparently a juvenile.
Oh.
Not a fully grown vertebra, so potentially could have gotten even bigger.
Yeah.
The original paper describes it as getting quite large, maybe several meters long, and says the adult size might have been as large as, and cites Madsoia and Gigantophus. Now, Madsoia and Gigantophus are two Madsoid snakes that are also very large. In fact, the Sarmiento Formation also has Madsoia, the species Madsoia bai, which has been estimated to grow up to 10 meters. That's 30 plus feet. Now, I know that Gigantophus and at least some other Madsoid remains have been scaled down since their early estimates, so I don't know if that's still the estimate for the size of that one. So this is a vertebra from a snake that was also maybe a giant boa from the Eocene. Wow. And also lived alongside at least one other giant Madsoid. So another one where we've got multiples.
So cool. Just big snakes.
A lot of big snakes. And again, that's another genus. That's another evolution of giant size.
It's a thing these kinds of snakes are good at doing.
And then we move back to the mid to late Paleocene, around 60 million years ago, to talk about Titanoboa. Titanoboa cerahonensis, the name that you knew from the start of this episode, we would have to spend a bunch of time on.
Yep.
Like, we went to your episode and we were like, we gotta talk about Deinosuchus.
Yep.
Well, and in fact, just like that episode 194, at least one of the requests for that episode was Deinosuchus.
Yes.
One of the requests for this episode was Titanoboa.
Yep.
So here's Titanoboa. Titanoboa was identified as a boine, so within true boas, or boid, however your taxonomy wants to break down. Titanoboa fossils come from the Cerrejón Formation in Colombia from a coal mine, originally described in 2009 based on an assemblage of almost 200 vertebrae and ribs.
I forgot it was that many.
One of the things, Titanoboa is A, the oldest true boa, B, spoilers, the largest snake of all time.
Yep.
Asterisk. But also, it's a fairly well-represented snake. Not only a couple hundred vertebrae and ribs, but those were interpreted as representing at least 28 individual snakes.
Oh, yeah.
So this isn't like a couple of big skeletons. This is a bunch of bones from several different individuals.
Mm-hmm.
A 2013 report described more vertebrae and skull material, including several skull bones, which means we now have skull vertebrae and ribs of Titanoboa. We have an astonishingly good look at this snake. The largest of Titanoboa's vertebrae. So, as a reminder, my 10-foot Burmese python skeleton has vertebrae up to 2.5 centimeters wide. The giant python from Riversley that is estimated to true giant size had vertebrae 6 centimeters wide at their widest. The largest of Titanoboa's vertebrae are 12 centimeters wide. This animal is so big. The skull is estimated to have been 40 centimeters long. That is 16 inches of snake skull. Huge. Utterly gigantic. Research multiple times has used individual elements to estimate the total length of the body. This is something that we can do. So in snakes today, certain measurements on the vertebrae correlate roughly to the full length of the snake, especially within groups. Mm-hmm. Certain parts of the skull correlate to the length of the snake. So those estimates, the first estimate using vertebral width, estimated Titanoboa's full body length at 12 meters plus or minus 2 meters. That is 39 feet plus or minus 6 feet.
Ugh.
The second estimate, based on skull material comparing it with modern anacondas, estimated its total length at 12.8 meters plus or minus 2.2, or 42 feet plus or minus 7. So somewhere between 10 and 15 meters, or 33 and 50 feet. This is probably a 40 to 45 foot snake.
Mm-hmm.
Mass estimates, which are very hard to do, and there is quite a range here. Mass estimates for Titanoboa range from 600 kilograms, which is like 2/3 of a ton, to 1,800 kilograms or 2 tons.
Yeah.
So again, shooting right down the middle somewhere, this is a snake the size of a horse. That is a literal ton of snake.
Yeah.
40 feet. And not only that, unlike so many of the other fossils that are represented by a vertebra, Titanoboa, among the various fossils known from it, bones of this size are known from at least 8 different individuals.
Yeah.
Which means that this wasn't just one individual that happened to get, right? This wasn't just the Guinness World Record holder for Titanoboa. This was a size they were reaching repeatedly.
Yes. So big.
It's so big.
It's unwieldy big.
It's like, it's redundant to say, like, yeah, it's Titanoboa, it's huge, it's the biggest snake of all time. This animal is twice as long, potentially, as the threshold for giant snakes we talked about before.
Yep.
It is so big. You could lose an anaconda in this snake.
Yes. Yep.
Titanoboa, upon its description, became the largest known snake of all time, the largest known land vertebrate from the Paleocene and Eocene.
Yep.
The largest land animal from this time period was a snake. Now, if you've been listening to the podcast and keeping up with the news, you will know that earlier this year, a bunch of upstart researchers had the gall to describe a Madsoid from the Eocene of India named Vasuki indicus, which is also estimated to be between 10 and 15 meters long.
Yep.
Similar size to Titanoboa, it is worth noting for the purposes of this episode that Vasuki's largest vertebrae are only 11 centimeters across.
Oh, that's it?
So, get out of here. When we do a Madsoid episode, I'll note that it's worth noting that the estimates for Vasuki technically are a little bit longer on the highest end, which actually might not be true because the range is almost exactly the same, which is very fun.
Well, it's
even though they're using different snakes for their comparison.
Yeah,
I believe.
And it makes sense to a degree because it's kind of similar when we were talking about the big crocs of like they all seem to be kind of hovering around a similar size.
Mm-hmm.
Same with like big theropods, that there does seem to be with a lot of groups, especially big predators, evidently. There's kind of a size range that's like, yeah, this is as big as they ever seem to get. It's big. It's very big when they get that size, but they seem to kind of hover around the same max size range.
Well, that was the thing that was so interesting about the Vasuki discovery, is that giant snakes in the fossil record tend to be like 20 foot, 25 foot, 30 foot maybe. There have been a couple that have been estimated at maybe 30 to 35, but at least one of those has been knocked back down over time. And then Titanoboa came along at 40 feet long, and it was this weird outlier.
This jump.
Huge jump. So when Vasuki got announced, part of me was like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense that this has happened multiple times.
That there wasn't just a one-off species that figured it out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Titanoboa, phylogenetic studies have found it to be potentially closest related to modern boas in the Pacific Islands and Madagascar. So in that case, not boine, but within boids, right? That's the core family.
Yep.
And also interesting that would mean not most closely related to the American groups today, but also this is the Paleocene when, as we discussed in the Eocene, everybody was all over the place. So who knows? Titanoboa also comes from coastal river deposits alongside large fish, and there are crocs that it lived alongside, because of course there are. I mean, it's South America.
Yep, that's
it's
what
Colombia.
It does.
This is not a dissimilar habitat to green anacondas today, to which Titanoboa is most often compared, being a giant boa. The skull of Titanoboa has been noted for its high number of teeth. They are very toothy, but the teeth are weakly fused to the jaw, so they're not very strong anchored teeth.
Okay.
That plus certain shapes in the joints of the jawbones have led researchers to compare it most similarly to adaptations we see in modern fish-eating snakes.
That's what I was wondering.
That's the suspicion that Titanoboa may have been mainly a fish eater.
Yeah.
Which is not quite what anacondas today. I mean, they'll eat fish.
Yes.
But anacondas aren't quite, as far as I know, specialized for fish.
That's not, I've never heard them discussed that way.
And indeed, the authors noted that if this is true and Titanoboa was mostly a fish eater, we don't see boas today that are fish specialists.
Yeah.
There are boas that can eat fish, but we don't have specialists in that. This means that, again, a Titanoboa, probably very much like an anaconda, spending its time in the water, maybe even hunting in the water most of the time if it's going after fish.
Yep. Which, even though it's not the Amazon yet by that point, the rainforests of South America seem like a good place if you're gonna be eating freshwater fish.
Yes.
They probably still had some of the most impressive ones like they do today.
Yeah, you should have stuck around for the dolphins.
Yep.
Titanoboa.
Oh, man.
Really, episode 172.
Oh, that would have been cool.
Yeah, although those are big dolphins.
Yep.
Although, I mean, but this is a 40-foot snake. So, yeah. It also makes sense to imagine Titanoboa as largely aquatic because it's huge.
Yes.
And that is a trend we often see, that you can get away with being big in the water more easily than you can on land.
Yeah, well, it's like the green anaconda is not agile on land by any means.
No. It's very similar to when we were talking about running up against an alligator.
Yep.
It's like, yeah, if you run into an anaconda on land, you're fine. Just walk away.
Yeah.
Just leave.
It's going to slowly slither after you if it does want to pursue.
If it wanted to for some reason.
And it's like big crocs aren't agile on land. Big snakes are not particularly fast out of the water.
No. They strike fast. Like a big snake will strike fast, and they can cover a lot of distance with that strike.
So you can still have them hunt, but they're often using that ambush bear trap mentality.
But they're not going to chase. Like, snakes don't chase,
period.
Generally speaking. But especially a big snake is not, you're not running across the ground.
And if you're going to be like an anaconda, striking out of the water is a perfectly viable way to hunt.
Yeah, that's how the crocs do it.
You can also move better.
Yeah, if you grab a capybara and pull it into... Well, a capybara is not the best example because they're very good swimmers.
Yes.
But you know what I'm getting at. You grab a jaguar and you pull it into the water, you are in your element now.
Exactly.
Also, you do what crocs do and you drown your prey.
Yep.
You don't have to wait for the heart attack. You can just drown it.
And snakes, anacondas can do a particularly cool version of that because they can coil around and then take their head away from the coil and go up and breathe.
They can have a little snorkel from their coil.
Like crocs don't get to do that because you have to use your face for everything.
Yep.
They can just be like, all right, I'll be right back. I'm going to go take a breath. You keep drowning.
So what we need is a snake that evolves butt breathing like turtles. Extend that left lung. You're not using it. Put the left lung down there and just stick the tail up out of the ground like a straw. Just breathe while you drown stuff. The other thing that is famous about Titanoboa is that because it is gigantic, the original paper attempted to use its size to estimate the temperatures at the time, to use it as a paleothermometer. Comparing with modern snakes today, they concluded temperatures of 30 to 34 degrees Celsius, which is like 85 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So hot.
It's warm.
Other researchers have challenged this. They have pointed out that it's hard to use a living species as a thermometer, especially an animal, because they can behaviorally regulate their temperature.
Yes.
Like you can go in the water, and then maybe it doesn't matter as much if you're spending most of your time in the water.
You can find shade.
You can find shade. You can coil up if you want to get a little warmer. There's a bunch of ways that there's wiggle space in here, potentially. Actually, I meant to say this before during our other conversation. Vasuki, which is potentially Titanoboa-sized, was interpreted as not aquatic.
Oh.
So you don't necessarily have to be in the water to be that size, potentially.
That is very intriguing.
Also probably not like a fast snake.
No, yeah.
But, I mean, but at the same time, we've got, anacondas today are aquatic, but reticulated pythons are not. Vasuki does appear to potentially be a slenderer snake.
Yeah.
Right, Titanoboa might be shaped like an anaconda, and Vasuki potentially is shaped more like a big python. Who can say?
Which is also a very cool thing to picture.
Yes. So you would have the situation where people would be like, well, Titanoboa is the heaviest snake of the Paleogene, and Vasuki is the longest snake of the Paleogene.
Yep.
Who can say? Also, one more note about Titanoboa, it continues this trend that we've been seeing so far of not being the only giant snake in its habitat. Earlier this year, in 2024, a study identified vertebrae from the Cerrejón Formation that have been identified as paleophiid snake. Now again, we've talked about this before. We talked about this in episode 3. We talked about it a bunch in episode 169. Boas and pythons and madsoids have all gotten giant. Paleophiid snakes were a group of aquatic snakes. Famously in like the Tethys Sea, episode 171, that got huge.
Yeah.
This is a paleophiid snake. Notably, it seems to be more similar to the potentially semi-aquatic ones than the fully aquatic ones, that based on the vertebrae is estimated to have potentially had a total body length of 8 meters or 25 feet long, which is on par with the biggest of the paleophiids, which were like 8, 9, maybe even 10 meter long snakes. Huge snakes. So not only do we have this trend of giant body sizes evolving over and over and over again in snakes, boas, pythons, and beyond, there's also possibly, and the timing is always very hard to work out.
Yes.
These snakes may have been 1 million years apart or something. But either giant snakes coexisting or at the very least replacing each other in very similar habitats, very short time periods.
Yep.
So giant snakes are just a thing that Earth does for the last 80 million years or so.
It's so intriguing because they're such standout examples of snakes today. And so it's not necessarily surprising that it's happened in the past, because that's true with most things. There's an example. There's more fossil record than there is things alive today.
Yes.
So statistically, there's going to be an example of someone else who did a similar thing. But it is notable, like the consistency and like the consistency in sizes and the variety that has shown up, and that there were a few that there used to be another size category. Yeah. That we don't have represented today.
Yet bigger.
Yes.
Double-digit meter long snakes.
And that's That's really, really impressive.
Yep. Also worth noting that both Titanoboa and Vasuki are Paleocene-Eocene, which, episode 103, one of the warmest time periods in Earth history, and they're both tropical.
Yep.
So they were in the tropics during one of the warmest times in Earth history. A time period so warm that some researchers have postulated that animals might have had to leave the tropics.
Yes.
Because it got so hot.
Yep.
These are, not at all surprising because, again, there isn't a one-to-one correlation with temperature and body size because there's all sorts of variables. But all the largest snakes and indeed terrestrial reptiles in the world today are tropical.
Yep.
Boas and pythons are pretty much exclusively tropical. That's where they get big.
Yes. It definitely helps to warm up a large body if you've got excess heat on the planet at that time. So cool. And the questions abound of like, what would Titanoboa have looked like while it was hunting?
Mm-hmm.
Were you still constricting? How do you constrict with a body that long? Like, what does that even look like?
Yeah, because this is a snake that might have been like 3 or 4 feet thick.
Yeah.
Like, this had to have been a hugely thick snake.
And so were you still hunting the... it's like the question... Once again, the questions we came up with the crocs of, are you still behaving...
Do you still snake like a snake?
Or are you now having to do something different or able to do something different? Have you broken into new ways of living because you're just at a different weight class that allows you to interact with the world?
Did Titanoboa, were its eyes even higher on its head?
Right.
I don't know if we have that part of the cranium to know that answer. I've never seen it described. Were they just like together?
Yep.
The stalk eyes on the top of your head. Boas and pythons, so cool.
Very awesome snakes.
They've never quite been my favorite snakes just because I have more experience with a bunch of other snakes. I have a bunch of favorites. But I love all snakes. Giant snakes are hard not to love. And as is so often the case, I now have a much greater appreciation for this group. I want to go like hang out with a boa.
Yeah.
Now I want to go to like a reptile house and find where their boas and pythons are and like stare at them.
Yep.
They're such cool animals.
Just truly impressive. Like one of those animals that really embodies the term awe-inspiring. Of just how are you that much animal? And it makes it all the funnier that we used to have people being like, surely dinosaurs had to have a butt brain to control that much animal. It's like, have you seen an anaconda? Their head's this big and they're controlling all of that.
The whole thing.
They don't need a butt brain.
Well, they don't have legs.
Yeah.
They're saving, ram.
Absolutely.
Well, and they also have... and I want to shed some love on the little ones, too.
Yes.
Little boas are... The fact that this is a group of snakes that is by itself doing almost all of the snake things that I always like to talk about. Like, these are terrestrial, burrowing, swimming, and climbing snakes. All within each group. Each of these groups has like 40, 50 species.
Yeah.
Like, pythons within 40 species are doing all of those things.
Yep.
That's super cool. And the big ones have the same feeling to me as a tiger. It's like, this is an animal that is intimidating and impressive and beautiful.
Yes.
Like, they're so... Like, reticulated pythons are so pretty.
They really are.
Such a gorgeous group. Most pythons, and boas for that, and they tend not to be boring colored snakes, especially the big jungle, like, rainforest-dwelling ones.
Emerald boa is one of my all-time... Not only because they're very pretty and they do the cool draping, they've also got those big teeth.
And those big eyes.
So they're just a very cool-looking face. Yeah, those have always been one of my top favorites.
Yeah, they're great education snakes. Ball pythons, generally boas and pythons tend to be... Because they're pretty chill.
Yeah.
They're big, which both means that they're impressive and memorable, but also that they're easy to see from across the room, and they're easy to keep track of.
Yes.
But if you, for some reason, you drop your ball python, it's not getting away.
Yep.
It's 4 feet long and it's a python. It's right there. So they're really good ambassador snakes. They're also just really chill.
Well, and
they tend to be very calm.
Yes.
I don't want to say friendly, but they're not very defensive. They're not very bitey.
Well, and they're not very jerky.
They don't move very much.
Yeah, they're not making fast, quick darting movements, which some smaller snakes can, and that can be very alarming to people.
Yes.
But also, like, them being big, it's kind of got the thing of, like, in a nature book or, you know, an educational book where it's like, spiders can be scary, but if we zoom in on it, it makes them a little less mysterious. Yes. You can actually see it clearly, and we can be like, look, they've got a little face.
See the nose
got
and its
eyes.
eyes.
They're fuzzy all over. Like, yeah, it's got that where it's not this so small that it's vague and unknowable. It's big and easy to see, so it takes away a lot of the mystery, which can help people who are maybe a little less comfortable around snakes.
Yeah. It also is nice that they're big enough that you can hand them to somebody. Like, I've seen demonstrations where you can, like, drape a ball python over a kid's shoulders or something, and it's not going to go anywhere, and the kid's not going to hurt it very easily. So they're easy to handle. They're big and impressive. Yeah. And here in North America, they also have that benefit of being exotic.
Yes.
Like, this isn't a snake that you've been taught to be afraid of specifically.
Yep.
It's not like this is a cottonmouth and you're like, my dog got killed by one of those.
Yep.
It's a python. It came from far away in a jungle somewhere. It has a little bit of that unfamiliarity that can make them a little less intimidating.
A bit more abstract. And,
yes.
Yep. Yeah. No, they're great.
Yeah. This has been a great Snake Month episode. This was so much fun.
I learned a ton.
This episode was a little bit of a beast to put together. That's what I get for doing an episode about two different groups of snakes at the same time.
Similar yet still two groups.
Ooh. But thank you to those who requested it. Thank you to everybody for listening through. We hope you appreciate it. The blog post will have a bunch of pictures of these beautiful snakes that we've been talking about. There are also a bunch of great pictures of fossils of these guys, which is great. That's not often the case in sometimes the fossil groups, there's just no good pictures of them.
Yep.
There's at least one great open access paper that's got pictures of Paleophis and Eoconstrictor that are fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Before we wrap up and stop talking about snakes, we've got patron questions to do. Every episode, before we end the whole thing, we like to answer questions submitted by our patrons on our Patreon as a thank you for supporting us, your generous support that helps us to keep going here on Patreon, and also because you're the best. Will, what do we got?
Our first question is...
We got two questions. We had two snake questions.
Yes. The first is from Danielle, which is, do sidewinders have a preferred direction? Can they sidewind both ways with equal ease?
This is a fascinating question. If anybody out there is unfamiliar with what sidewinding is, this is a particular type of movement used for desert-dwelling, especially snake species. You see this in desert-dwelling vipers, for example. That's kind of a slithery hop motion.
Yeah.
But they move, the body head to tail is perpendicular to the direction they're moving.
Yeah, so they're moving sideways roughly.
Yeah, they turn the head to the left or to the right, and then they side hop in that direction. Sidewinding. The question is, can they do it left and right?
Yes.
Do they have a preferred direction? Does it matter? This is a question I did not expect to find an answer to.
Yeah.
Let alone on the first paper that I read. I found a paper this is a robotics paper. If you start looking up snake locomotion, you get a lot of robotics papers.
Yep.
This paper had videos of sidewinders changing direction while moving. So they will be sidewinding in one direction, and then if something gets in their way or spooks them, they can just turn around and sidewind the other direction without breaking stride.
Yeah, just do a K-turn.
Yeah, just reverse and go the other direction. So they can switch from left to right.
I feel like I have seen a video of that now that you mention it. Yeah.
The paper also explicitly says snakes use sidewinding with a vertical phase offset of either 90 degrees or minus 90 degrees, so left or right, without apparent behavioral preference or locomotor performance difference during sidewinding.
Interesting.
So at least according to this paper's studies, it doesn't seem that these snakes have a preference for which direction they go.
Which does make sense from a survival standpoint of, if you want to just start moving towards something, if you do have a preferred direction that that you are kind of beholden to, you have to turn your whole body all the way around to start going that way, which is more of a thing for a snake than us.
Yes. You gotta turn all the way around.
We just rotate, which is like 2 or 3 little half steps.
That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if individual snakes do have a preference.
Yes, exactly.
That you'd have to like watch a bunch
Yep.
of snakes over time, but left and right-handedness is pretty common among animals,
Yep.
that they have a preferred side for various things. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if you had a pet sidewinder for several years, don't do that. If you notice that, most of the time it goes to the left.
Yep. Yeah. Very interesting.
Excellent question.
Our next question is from Quantum Robin. They say that they just listened to the James Bond Silver Screen Science, and it made them wonder about other animals in film. In particular, Jean-Claude Van Damme's Hard Target. Could you really knock out a rattlesnake with a punch? And could you remove the rattle and leave the snake essentially unharmed?
So, this is a great question. I went and looked up this scene. I don't know if you've ever seen this.
No, I haven't.
Hard Target, Jean-Claude Van Damme catches a rattlesnake, punches it in the face to knock it out, and then bites the rattle off of its tail and leaves it as a trap for some other guys.
Yeah.
So, could you knock out a rattlesnake with a punch? Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I mean,
if you're Jean-Claude Van Damme.
If you're Jean-Claude... Well, and if you get hit in the head hard enough, it causes blunt force trauma to your brain, and that's what knocks you out.
Yes.
I assume that could also happen to a snake.
Most animals that I'm aware of, you can stun them with it. Like that's what a lot of people who go fishing will do. Is they'll catch the fish and they'll just knock the fish against the side of the boat.
Yes.
And it doesn't kill the fish, but it stuns them enough that they stop struggling.
Now, it's not going to be like in the movies where someone gets knocked out and then they wake up and they're fine.
Yep.
Like if you punch a snake in the face, you're more likely to kill the snake. Yeah. They have very small heads.
As you noted just a second ago, you get knocked out due to blunt force trauma to the brain.
Yes. Like, humans don't just get back up after a concussion. You're supposed to go to the hospital.
That's not just a forced nap when you get knocked out. If those characters that get knocked out in movies probably have some amount of a concussion and may have permanent brain damage.
Yes.
Like, you are not okay after you get knocked out.
I absolutely do not recommend punching rattlesnakes in the face. Number 1, that's rude.
Yes.
You're going to hurt the snake. Number 2, you should never be putting any part of your body near a rattlesnake's face.
Yep.
There's no reason to do that. That's the dangerous part.
I feel like they'd be hard to punch.
I can't imagine trying to punch a snake.
You have to hold it by the neck.
And that's what in the clip, that's what he's doing. He's holding it by the neck and then he punches it in the face.
And if you punch a snake in the in the face when you're holding it, you're just going to break its neck.
Yeah.
Like, you're just going to kill that snake because that's a very thin neck that you're holding with very big hands.
Yeah, they also have very delicate face, like skull bones. So please don't punch rattlesnakes.
You'd have to not be holding it, and then you're trying to punch a noodle.
Right. Well, you're just going to punch it into the ground.
Yeah, like, it just doesn't seem feasible.
Don't punch snakes. Especially don't punch rattlesnakes.
Yes.
That's a bad idea.
This is the official message of the Common Descent podcast.
The second question is, could you remove the rattle and leave the snake essentially unharmed? This is interesting. Number 1, in that particular clip, Jean-Claude Van Damme tears the rattle off the snake and seems to leave a little bloody stump.
Mm-hmm.
So that snake survives, but is certainly not unharmed.
Yep.
A snake can certainly lose the tip of its tail and survive.
Yeah. Most animals can.
A lot of animals can do that. Setting aside the movie circumstance where they are very mean to a snake, it's a fake snake.
Yeah.
Rattlesnakes can lose their rattles.
Yep.
So the rattle of a rattlesnake, their tail is actually really interesting. The tail of a rattlesnake ends in sort of a blunt end.
Yep.
And then there's a little bony stylus that sticks out the end of it, kind of like a pygostyle on a bird's tail.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rattle is a series of scales that build up off of the end of the tail that are held by that bony anchor, but most of the rattle doesn't have bone in it.
Yeah, and those scales aren't like fused to each other.
Yeah, they're loosely connected.
It's like it's more like links on a chain,
mm-hmm.
where these are connected in a way that they can't come apart, but each is still an individual item.
Yes. And rattlesnakes do shed parts of their rattles from time to time. I saw a post online where somebody, I think it was on Reddit, where someone was like, what have I found? And it was just a whole rattlesnake rattle.
Yep.
And yeah, they'll fall off sometime. Usually not the whole thing.
Yes.
And then they just keep growing it. So rattlesnakes add sections to the tail every time they shed. Mm-hmm. So the tail gets longer and longer, or the rattle gets longer and longer. And they will shed like the end parts of the rattle from time to time. So you can, in theory, you could cut off at least most of a rattlesnake's rattle without physically hurting the snake.
If you leave that little button that's connected to the tail,
yes,
the rest is just dead scale.
Mm-hmm. It's like fingernails. Mm-hmm. Now, whether that would leave it unharmed, you are taking away the thing it uses to deter big threats and predators.
Yeah, like in human care, if this were a rattlesnake at a zoo,
right,
removing that rattle, that snake will live a healthy life. It will slowly regrow a rattle. A-okay, fine.
Yes.
In the middle of the desert,
yeah, that snake might now not, be one thing less capable of defending itself.
Yeah, it's kind of like saying you could dequill a porcupine because the quills are meant to come off anyway when they use them defensively. So removing the quills isn't actually going to hurt the porcupine, but now you have a defenseless porcupine.
Yes. So, snakes have brains like the rest of us, and they are susceptible to damage like the rest of us. Rattlesnake rattles are loose scales that grow off the back of their tails. These are fascinating science facts that lead us to the conclusion that if you were to punch a rattlesnake, which you shouldn't do, you could probably knock it out. And if you were to take off the rattle, you could do so in a way that wouldn't harm it, and you also shouldn't do that.
Yeah, but if you did that, especially if you did both those to the same snake, which is what happened here,
yes,
that is a snake that's going to wake up with a concussion if it survived the punch, and now not be able to defend itself.
Spoilers: that snake then gets shot in the face.
Oh.
So it's not a great showing for the movie. I see this is all I've ever seen of this movie, and I don't need to see anymore.
What are you doing, John?
On Snake. Quantum Robin, how dare you invoke this horrible traumatic experience during Snake Month. Thank you, Danielle and Robin, for those questions. Thank you to all of our patrons who support us here at Common Descent. Thank you to all of our listeners for joining us for this appropriately long episode. For Snake Month. Be sure to check out the blog post on our website after this episode for pictures and links. Don't forget that it is still Snake Month. By the time this episode comes out, Snake Month is almost over, which means that there will only be a short amount of time left for you to participate in the Snake Stuff channel on Discord, and even more importantly, for you to potentially join the Snakes and Crocs tier on Patreon. We have had so many people sign up and contribute to the Snakes and Crocs tier this summer. We will be donating a whole bunch of money towards snake, croc, and turtle conservation at the end of the summer. We're very excited about that.
Yeah.
And it will be matched up to $1,000 by a generous matcher on behalf of Mayflower Enterprises. So fantastic. If you're listening to this and July isn't over yet, there's still time for you to join that tier if you are inclined. Also, DragonCon's coming up.
Woo!
So come check us out for that. Thanks again to all of our requesters for this episode request. If you have your own requests, go to the topic request form in the episode description on our website. Submit your requests there. Thank you to our patrons. Special thanks to our top tier patrons, Danielle the Bug Lover, Sarah May, Robert Mart, Bugs All the Way Down, and Melissa Barksdale. We deeply appreciate you. We release episodes every fortnight. That is one night for every meter in Titanoboa. Potentially.
I know that makes it seem like it's a longer time than it is, making that comparison.
One Titanoboa worth of days from now, there will be another episode. In August.
Yeah.
This is the end of Snake Month, so we will be bidding adieu to Snake Month shortly.
Which is ironic, since we just talked about very long snakes.
I appreciate for multiple reasons that Snake Month is longer than Croc Month.
Yep.
Snake Month is technically one day longer than Croc Month is, and I like that because A, deservedly so. just a whole extra day for celebrating the best animals. But also, yeah, that's because we're longer.
Yep.
Sign-off phrase.
Thanks for listening to the Common Descent Podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and check our WordPress blog for pictures and links after each episode. Huge thanks to our patrons whose support helps keep this podcast running and who get access to bonus goodies on Patreon. The song you're hearing is called On the Origin of Species by Protodome, which we found at ocremix.org. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.